Good evening, the music works, the mic doesn't. That's right. Hello. It's not. I could continue. I just know that for recording purposes, they need to have this going. You guys, are you up? Is your mic up? Hello. Okay.
Okay.
All right. So let's at least call the meeting to order. Good evening, everybody. Welcome back. Happy New Year, and so forth. Can I have, let's see, Michelle Dar, would you like to lead us in the pledge chant? Thank you. Thought you'd hide in the back.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Hello, hello. Okay. I got a motion to approve the agenda, please. Moved by Ms. Marcus, seconded by Mrs. Hacker. Thank you both. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Agenda carries. Dr. Berge, report from closed session.
In closed session, the board took action to notify the temporary certificated employees identified by the following employee numbers: NY 06614828, JR 8815525, UY 5289695, KM 1999432, DD 0299151, TJ 5429460, that the employees will be released from the temporary contracts effective at the end of the 2018 school year and non-reelected for the 2019-2020 school year, and directed the superintendent or designee to send out the appropriate legal notices. The votes of the board members was 5-0, unanimous.
Thank you, Dr. Berge. Still off, okay. Ms. Krausauer, any cards? Thank you, ma'am. Okay, I have one card. Rita Azizi. Up to the podium, please.
Okay, my name is Rita Azizi. I've appeared before the board on numerous occasions, and I've advised the board that I will continue appearing before the board every time there's a session and an opportunity.
None of them are on yet.
I think you can hear me. Can you hear me? No.
Can you pause the clock for a second? Okay, but you have it over the air? Okay. We'll continue. Just for the sake of the room, everybody just project. Okay, go ahead.
Thank you. My name is Rita Azizi. I've appeared before the board on numerous occasions, and I've advised the board that I will continue appearing before the board. It's a simple request. I'm appearing on behalf of a student who attended El Rodeo School from kindergarten. I requested that he get transferred to Hawthorne School for 7th grade. At the end of 7th grade, I requested that he get moved back to El Rodeo. In August of 2018, he was approved to move back to El Rodeo School. We have, for the past month and a half, requested that the school district honor their decision of August 2018 to remove him and take him back to El Rodeo. But now, the Beverly Hills Unified School District is refusing to move him back to El Rodeo. And I have on numerous occasions sent emails. I've appeared before the board. This student has also appeared before the board and met with the superintendent, and he has expressed his concerns and his reasons for wanting to move back to El Rodeo, which is his home school, and it is the school that is closest to his residence. And there is no reason being provided why. An approval was provided in August of 2018, and now that approval is being revoked. I have provided a letter from his therapist urging that he get sent back to El Rodeo. I have provided numerous reasons. He has provided numerous reasons. I believe that everyone agrees that the reasons we have provided as to moving him back are serious reasons, and he has valid reasons for wanting to be moved back. And interestingly, another Hawthorne student decided to apply to go back to be transferred to El Rodeo. That transfer was granted immediately. A student from Beverly Vista wanted to go to El Rodeo. That transfer was granted immediately. But this one child's request continues to be dishonored. Again, I don't understand why he was granted the request, and in August of 2018 he was cleared to go back, and now he's not. We're talking about 4.5 months that are left in the 8th grade year that this child is in, and these are a crucial 4.5 months. He has missed so many days at Hawthorne School. This has affected him adversely, and I will continue to appear. I will continue to appeal this decision because no valid reason has been provided to me. Why is this approval now being revoked? Why can't the student go to his home school of El Rodeo? It's only 4.5 months. That's where all of his friends are, and based on his therapist's urging, this is where this child should be. He should be returned to El Rodeo, and I'm asking you to please consider returning him to El Rodeo. Thank you.
Thank you. Staff presentations. Dr. Berge, do you have the...
Yes, so we're going to give you an update on our reconfiguration process. We're going to start with our facilities update, and in my superintendent's report, I'll give you a different side, the operational, instructional, educational side.
Thank you. Good evening, Mr. President, members of the board. Yes, this is not going to work too well without the mic, but I will try. Not a teacher, so I don't have a teacher voice. For those of you that don't know who I am, my name is Pamela Johnson, and I'm part of the bond management team. So as you know, reconfiguration touches every part of the operation of the district: instruction, technology, human resources, the business office, and facilities. And Dr. Berge has said that he will be presenting an update later in the agenda, so I'm just going to focus on the facilities component and the logistics of the physical move. The facilities component requires an evaluation of the condition of the sites to answer the question, what needs to be done to accommodate the changes? And of those needs, what can we realistically accomplish by July 31st? I'm pleased to report that the needs assessment has been completed. It was done in collaboration with the superintendent, the cabinet, the principals, teachers, maintenance personnel, and lead custodians. The list of projects includes everything from adding lockers to replacing a PA system to moving playground structures. Our efforts to date have included identifying in great detail every action item, like the PA system, and establishing a timeline for procurement and installation. Each identified action has multiple parts that need to be sequenced. Many of the projects are still in the planning stage. For example, evaluating the infrastructure to deliver food services and determining what is involved in replacing the PA system. Other projects are in the procurement process, like changing out inadequate faucets in the sinks. We've ordered the parts. That'll be happening soon. And some have been done, like adding manual flushes to the urinals. It was a big project. There are projects that can be done over the next 4 months and others that can't be done until school's out. That's the facilities piece. The physical move is next, and it has layers. The first layer is the move among the schools. So El Rodeo, K5 to Hawthorne, El Rodeo 6-8 to Beverly Vista, Horace Mann 6-8 to Beverly Vista, Hawthorne 6-8 to Beverly Vista, and Beverly Vista TK5 to Horace Mann. The second layer involves moves within the schools to accommodate the new configuration. So the outcome of these external and internal moves is that nearly every K-8 classroom in the district will be moving. So that's all the Vikings and all the Huskies and all the Bulldogs and all the Eagles. To help manage the complexity of the move, storyboards are being developed. The boards show the current use of every space in the 4 schools and the future use of those spaces. And I brought a sample to show you. To give you an idea. So each one of the schools, depending on the size of the school, may have 3 or 4 more of these boards to get all the classroom wings in. And we have one that starts with current. What's the current use of the spaces? It's got what's happening in the room and the teacher's name. Current. And then we have the future. So working with this whole team, we have plotted the future on here, but we won't have these completed until the teacher assignments are available in the end of January. And then we'll complete these. You want to? So, sure. They're color-coded, but we will. So depending on the cost estimate for the move, a moving company or companies will be selected through an informal or formal bidding process. To bid the move, detailed information has to be provided. A spreadsheet documenting the move of each classroom. For instance, Hawthorne, room 223, moves to Hawthorne, room 117. Hawthorne, room 117, moves to Beverly Vista, room 203. Beverly Vista, room 203, moves to Horace Mann, 205, and so on for every classroom. And there are specialty moves. The library, band and orchestra, art, athletics, the administration offices, and teachers' workrooms. So the facilities component and the physical move rely on decisions made for instruction, including technology, decisions made by the business office, particularly food services, and action taken by human resources, teacher assignments, and classified assignments. Every decision may have an impact on the move. So we are plotting each task with all of its parts on a schedule with the responsible party noted. The superintendent, cabinet, the principals, and Don Blake's team will be meeting often to ensure every task has been identified with a pathway to completion at a date certain. Thank you.
Thank you. Colleagues, do you have questions now, or do you want to wait till after the presentation? We'll wait. Okay, continue.
No, that's right. I'll do mine
Your
in
stuff later?
Yeah.
Okay, great. Okay. Thank you very much, Pam. That was helpful, informative, and I think it gives the community kind of an oversight on exactly what some of the minutia of doing this is. So, moving on, the FCMAT audit report, I believe.
We were very fortunate last year to do an audit through Generation Ready for our general education curriculum and instruction. We were very pleased with the results. Last year, we had Generation Ready come back, do a presentation for us, and then Mr. Seaman was able to digest that information and come back and begin to talk about how we're going to incorporate some of those changes. We're very glad that the board also agreed to do that in our special education as well. So I'd like to introduce, we have Shailene Hart, who's back, who worked with us extensively, and also Jackie Kirk-Martinez, who did from FCMAT, that did the special education audit. Wow.
I'm kind of afraid to talk.
I'm afraid to talk. So I'm going to turn this right over to you.
All right. Well, thank you, Board President and trustees and others that are here this evening. Thank you so much for inviting us back. You're right. Beverly Hills did contract with us last year to come in and do a special education study. And so my name is Shailene Hart. I'm the Deputy Executive Officer at the Fiscal Crisis and Management Assistance Team, which is a mouthful, but it's commonly referred to as FCMAT and known throughout the state. For those of you that aren't familiar with our organization, we were established back in 1992 through AB 1200 to assist local educational agencies with fiscal accountability standards and helping out in that way. Lots of people tend to focus on the fiscal crisis piece of our name. We do get involved in districts that do get in trouble, but most of our work is done through that management assistance piece. And that's when a district invites us in to take a look at a particular operational area. And for Beverly Hills, that particular area was special education. We're actually a pretty small team. There's only about 12 of us that do work throughout the state. So when we have a very specialized study like this, we bring in professionals who have some real expertise in the area of special ed. So I was fortunate enough to lead a team of 5 that came in here last year at the very end of the school year. And I have Jackie Kirk-Martinez, who was part of the team. We also had Joanne Murphy, Keith Butler, and Philip Williams, who was part of our team. So that management assistance is a big part of what we do. Let's see if it'll move. There we go. All right, so for those of you that don't know, we are an external state agency. So once you hire us to bring us in, you don't get to say what goes into our report. And then our reports, once they're finalized, they do get published on our website. So we came in and had this particular scope of work. You can take a look there, and it was pretty comprehensive. Whoa, hit the wrong button. Oh my goodness, I'm having some technical difficulties. I'll be careful. But we took a look at those 9 particular scope areas. In fact, we hit almost everything except special education, transportation, and the analysis for returning programs from MPS. So we took a look at each one of those, and then FCMAT really writes to the deficit model. So we're not going to tell you all the wonderful things that are happening in Beverly Hills, although I'm sure you are very aware of the wonderful things that are happening. Really, we look to write to findings and recommendations under each one of those scope areas, and that's what is actually produced in the report. So for something to make it into our report, we do not just hear it from one particular source. We asked your district to upload all kinds of documents, and if you take a look there, I think we asked them to upload over 70 documents prior to our team ever stepping foot on your campus to give us an opportunity to really kind of front load and know what's happening in Beverly Hills. That allowed us to create an interview schedule, come on site, interview a number of individuals, a lot of people sitting here at this table, but across the board, teachers, both general and special education. We talked to paraeducators. We talked to clerical support related service providers, and had a few days here on site, almost an entire week. So we had the documents uploaded ahead of time that we got to peruse. We came on site to do the interviews, and then when we left, we did that deeper analysis and put together our report. So remember that the findings and recommendations are things that we identify in each one of the areas, and the recommendations are things that we have seen be successful throughout the state. Now, those are not going to work for every single district, and so we know that that's just advisory, and then as a district, you get to decide what works for you, but we'll kind of hit the highlights of each one of those areas. So in the area, the first scope area was general education academic support. So this is what happens with students prior to them being referred and placed in special education. So we know that having things in place like student study teams, having a response to instruction and intervention in place, multi-tiered systems of support, having that in place is what is going to help support your students who are struggling. And what we found when we were here is that Beverly Hills has given a lot of initial thought to that work. There's some good things happening around the district. It's just not systemized yet, or at the time that we were here. So there was lots of site-based decisions being made, and site-based decision-making can be a really positive thing. But in the area of special education and in the area of students struggling, if you don't have something consistent across your entire district, then it can create some inequities. If you have a particular school site administrator or a group of teachers on site that are very strong in certain interventions, then you could see some things being offered at one site that isn't necessarily offered at another site. And so whereas students struggling at school site A, let's say, may get some very systemized support, some interventions that are layered, where data is collected and then reported out through that student study team or through an intervention process. Their needs may be met that way through an intervention system, whereas at another school site that doesn't have that same layer of interventions, that student may move a little more quickly to being referred for special education and identified for special education. So even though we love site-based decision making in the area of special education, that can cause some struggles if you don't have something in place. So when you see a slide that looks like this, where it says the district should, this is taken directly from our report in terms of the recommendations that were made under that area. So under the area of general education academic support, these are just 4 that we pulled to kind of highlight. So the numbers purposely match the recommendations within the report, so even though they're not numerical there, but just to kind of hit the highlights, you know, having a consistent district-wide student study team process in place, obviously led by Ed Services since that's a general education function, monitoring those processes and procedures to make sure those are being done consistently from site to site. A couple other things there. Another one I'll highlight there is having a district-wide committee come together to talk about the wonderful things that are happening throughout your district in terms of interventions and supports that are happening for students in Beverly Hills. But then making a decision about what's going to be implemented at every single school site so that you can have that more systematic approach and make sure that all struggling students' needs are being met. So those are just some of the highlights there. The next area that we took a look at was special education, staffing and caseloads, and aid support. And this is one of those that, again, we take a look at things in reference to Ed Code standards and industry standards. One of the things that was difficult during the study is that there was just some inconsistencies that existed. So we really relied upon the numbers in special education. Their numbers seemed to be right on in terms of what was happening in the classrooms. But in terms of numbers that we received through the special education department, through HR, and then through business services, numbers were just a little bit different. And I will tell you, we see that consistently at school districts throughout California. And so what that means is that there just needs to be more communication, and there needs to be some meeting of the minds on a regular basis to make sure to talk through that staffing to make sure that everybody is working from the same document and has the same information and can be able to make informed decisions. One of the things that we saw, obviously, every district has unique factors in terms of determining staffing. You can take a look there. Yes, there were some areas that were overstaffed. In the area of RSP environmental aid support, that you were actually a little bit understaffed, but with the caveat that even though you were understaffed on your environmental aids, that program also had an additional 19.6 full-time equivalent, one-to-one aid support. So we saw an awful lot of that happening within Beverly Hills throughout your program. We really felt that because of the inclusive model, you know, if a student couldn't access the general education curriculum, often they were offered that one-to-one support. So we saw that quite a bit throughout your programs. And once you offer that one-to-one support, just you have to realize that's a very restrictive support, because then that child has a person attached to them, and often it can lead to very dependent behaviors. And so that's just something to be careful of. That just continues with mild moderate was just a little bit overstaffed. In terms of your prime staffing, which is your mod severe classrooms, the staffing was within industry standard, but the aid support was a little overstaffed there. All right. So in terms of some specific recommendations that we made there, was that to establish that one document to be used for staffing reconciliation, and that's what I talked about between that special ed, business services, and your HR departments. Taking a look at that RSP inclusion program, really kind of defining what that looks like, and making sure that students' needs are met in that least restrictive environment, which is always the push to make sure that that happens. And we really felt that you needed to increase your offerings of mild, moderate SDC. So because of that inclusive type model of SAI, or specific academic instruction, I know the acronym. So you termed it RSP when we were here, but it looked a little bit more like specific academic instruction, more of an inclusive type model where students who were mild or moderate were being provided services in the classroom, right? They were in their general education classroom setting for the most part. Some students struggled with that, and so that's usually when you saw that one-to-one support being offered at that time. But you may need to take a look at that and see if you need to offer some additional classes, because you did not have those for grades 2 through 8, and so we did see that as a need in your district. Adopting and implementing a comprehensive SKIA procedure. So let me explain what that is. So a SKIA procedure, anytime you are going to offer more intensive support, like let's say a one-to-one support for a student, or maybe a grouped support for a number of students, you really need to go through that SKIA process, which is Special Circumstance Instructional Assistance. And that is an assessment process. It's an actual process with assessments that happen, and so that additional support is not just happening through the IEP team just arbitrarily making that decision, but you have data to fall back on why that student requires additional support. When we were here, I know that Ms. Chisholm was already working on putting together a SKIA procedure and revamping that process. You had one, but it was a bit outdated. But the most important part of that is that when you have that SKIA procedure, is making sure that it also includes goals that are written every single year as part of the IEP, the process that is going to lead to independence. You don't want to get to the point where maybe, let's say, you attach a one-to-one to support for a student because they need it at that period of time. Absolutely, that's necessary many times. But there needs to be goals for independence. That should be the ultimate goal, and some students will never meet it, but every single year you should have goals towards independence that you're working towards, that you assess, so that maybe you can get them to the point where they don't need that kind of support, the one-to-one support. Maybe you can group them with other students, that sort of a thing. So I know that your district was already working on that last year when we were here. All right, next section up is related service provider staffing. So in addition to the instructional support that they receive, these are things that also support our special education students, like school psychologists, speech and language pathologists, adaptive PE, occupational therapists, things along those lines are known as related services. So you can see there in terms of particular counts, it again, every single district is unique, so you're going to have to figure out what works for you. One of the things I do want to point out under the speech and language pathologist is that you had one that was working grades 5 to 22, and you had a preschool person tagged as a preschool speech and language pathologist. But they were also providing services to 7 kindergarten and first graders. So for purposes of our comparisons, we pulled those kindergarten and first graders out of the preschool person's caseloads and put them with the 5 to 22 person, because those fall under different ed codes. And so we just kind of wanted to compare apples to apples. But we did take out any unique assignments. So like under the area of school psychologist, at the time that we were here, you had a 0.2 FTE person that was providing services to preschool. You had 2 FTE interns. Those are not included in the comparisons because the state averages are for K-12 caseloads. So we pulled out anything that did not apply to those state averages just for comparison purposes. That's some additional ones that you can just kind of see there where you were. We did see that in the area of school nurses, their caseloads were above industry standards. So we had made a recommendation. You can see that's one of our recommendations, is that you pick up some additional credentialed nurse staffing for that particular area. In terms of psychologists, we did show that you were over per industry standards, but in terms of building that response to intervention, instruction and intervention, you may want to realign duties and use them in that particular area. We see that being very successful throughout the state. All right. Next up is the area of identification. One of the things we were happy to see is that your identification rates were pretty steady. Across the state, identification rates are increasing. So in terms of students, even though enrollment as a whole throughout California is kind of on a decline, we see students with disabilities, that number kind of increasing. That's just a trend throughout the state. And here in Beverly Hills, you can see the last couple years, you were at 13% in 16-17, 12.9 in 17-18. So you're staying pretty steady. And even though you were above the statewide average at the time, that 10.7%, you were staying pretty steady, which is nice to see. The district was over the state average in 6 different categories. I just kind of highlighted a couple there. Other health impaired, you can see that your district was sitting at 15.9% while the state was at a 12% average. Autism, your district was at 17% while the state was at a 13.2%. So just some numbers, and all of it is in the charts there in your report, so you can dig into that for just a little bit more information. One of the things, in terms of the particular category of specific learning disability, that's where we kind of saw the largest increase year over year for your district at 2.1%. So just something to be aware of. And the 504 identification rates are on the rise. That's something that you can see from 2.9% in 16-17 to 3.5 in 17-18. You know, 504s are general education function, and it is for any time a student has a mental or physical impairment that inhibits a major life function. And so that is just something to be aware of, because a lot of times if you see your 504 identification rates increasing, that will trickle over into some special ed identification rates increasing. So we just kind of wanted to highlight that. So in terms of some things we wanted to highlight in terms of our recommendations there, is definitely to examine those determining factors of eligibility for other health impaired, that specific learning disability, and 504. So if you take a look and you actually analyze that data, why is it that children are qualifying under other health impaired, under specific learning disability? Can you see any particular trends so that you would have an opportunity to address that and put something in place to support those students? Or like in the area of 504, a lot of times we will see students who have asthma or diabetes or something along those lines have a 504. Do they always have to have a 504, or would a health plan work in that particular area? So those are things just to be aware of and take a look at. All right. Our next area up was the continuum of services, always keeping in mind that we want to provide services to students in the least restrictive environment. One of the things that was very rare to us is that, you know, your general service delivery model really focused on push-in and co-teach in grades K through 8. That was really kind of the model, and that inclusive model. You had co-teach in 1 mild moderate class at the high school level, and then 5 moderate severe classes for preschool through all the way past high school, because you provide services all the way up to 22. All right, but we few options do exist in the district for students needing more intensive services. So that's that one that I was talking about, that if they can't be provided support, if that inclusive environment, let's say in grades 2 through 8, where you don't have a mild moderate class, where possibly that you can offer them support, a lot of times those students are placed in a non-public school. And so that definitely will impact you. All right. Inclusive is a great thing. We've seen lots of wonderful things with the inclusive model, but it is not a one-size-fits all. And you just have to be aware that along with that, you really always have to be evaluating student needs to see if you're providing the support that they need. All right, continuing in that area. So we ended up, one of the findings was that, the lack of program delivery options available in the district does limit students with those more intensive academic and behavioral needs, intense medical needs, and many of them are placed out in NPS placements. One of the things that we had pointed out in our report, every year, your district, the state gives you basically a little report card in your annual performance report. One of the things that they do look at is least restrictive environment. Your district was making progress the last 2 years that we saw in the area of preschool least restrictive environment. At the time of our study, you were under the target for grades 6 to 22. You were just under that target, and we had recommended that you really keep a close eye on that. And I did look up just for 16, 17, just because I was curious, and you did not meet the target. So that percentage did continue to increase. So just be aware of that, if you can't offer the program here that's least restrictive and you place them away at MPS, that's obviously going to be something that's counted against you on that annual performance report that you'll then be held accountable for. So in terms of our recommendations under continuum of services, really was to evaluate preschool students. We also saw that preschool students at Beverly Vista, there was a SDC class there, but is there a less restrictive setting for this particular age group? So maybe kids that are mild, moderate in the preschool setting, is there a less restrictive environment there? Basically, to review your delivery service model, and we just felt that if you develop a committee that's led by student services to evaluate the effectiveness of co-teach model, and just if that's the model you're going with, and inclusion, really providing that professional development for all teachers, implementing that co-teach model for students with and without disabilities. All right. Just kind of a continuation there. That committee I was just talking about, maybe utilize them to evaluate the implementation of a learning center model. We threw that out there as something that you may want to consider, that may work in terms of a service delivery model for you. So we thought that you may need to evaluate that. And then really take a look at analyzing those out-of-district placements so that you can see if there's a particular trend there in terms of growing your own programs that can meet the needs of those students so that you're not sending those students away to an MPS would be very beneficial. So that leads right into our very next section, which is non-public schools and agencies. So what we saw here is that your district does utilize non-public agencies for a variety of needs. Some of it is staffing, and we see that on a regular basis. For years, at the time, it was areas such as speech, occupational therapy, physical therapy, nursing, and some autism support were the main things that you were using NPAs for. One of the things we would like to suggest, your district at the time combine the MPS and MPA, so non-public schools and non-public agencies. They combine that into the same reporting, but we think it's very beneficial if you can separate out those costs through a SACS code very easily, either an object or goal code, then you would be able to more closely monitor your non-public school and your non-public agency costs, and again be able to see those trends so that you can make informed decisions. All right, so some of the highlights in terms of recommendations in that particular area is, speech and language pathologists, we see a shortage across the state. Some districts have been able to meet their needs, but we see that as one. But really trying to recruit and secure both speech pathologists, occupational and physical therapists, and then develop strategies to decrease those MPA costs, again, through providing those services here in your district. Okay, in terms of organizational structure, you know, we always are a little bit hesitant to do comparisons to other districts because I have to tell you, you never know the unique circumstances or the complexities within a district. So can you look at numbers? Absolutely. But numbers only tell one story. So we always kind of give that little caveat, and it's there as part of our report. But we did look at similar K-12 unified districts who were similar in terms of enrollment, free and reduced price meal count, English learner population, and students with disabilities. So we came up with La Cañada, Oak Park, and South Pasadena as 3 districts that we could compare you to. You know, went on websites, contacted districts, and at the time of the study, in terms of your administrative management and clerical support, you had 6 positions. One of those was vacant at the time of our study, though. So, and we point that out in the report, but I just want to make sure that you do understand that because you didn't have a director position at the time that we were here, but you had 6 individuals. The average, excluding Beverly Hills, if we take you out of the mix, is 3 with the other like districts. In terms of functionality, really taking a look at the special ed procedural handbook, we found that lacking, but I understand even before we left, you guys were talking about working on that, so I have a feeling you're well on your way. So in terms of some of the highlights from our recommendations there is really to finalize that development of your new procedural handbook and ensure that there is a sequence of professional development related to that, the use of the new handbook. In terms of your administrators, having the handbook is one thing, but if your administrators and your staff don't know what's available there to them, then that will be difficult. All right, our next section was due process and litigation. So anytime that disputes arise over identification, assessment, educational placement, or the provision of a free appropriate public education, then there's steps outlined in Ed Code that really says you should make efforts to resolve those disagreements at the lowest level. Your district absolutely does that. We found that. Most of your disputes were over the provision of FAPE and are initiated by parents within your district at the time of the ones that we were looking at. One of the things we found is that past administration would roll over settlement agreements from year to year and just carry forward, let's say, a non-public school expenditure from year to year. We had talks with Ms. Chisholm while we were here. She had already identified that and started putting steps into place, so that just leads us right into one of our recommendations, is really to develop a protocol and procedures for reevaluating through that IEP process every single year to see if that's still an appropriate placement instead of just rolling it over and incurring those costs because it may no longer be the appropriate placement for a student. So that's one of the things that we had identified in that area. And then again, just determine the feasibility of creating your own programs to meet FAPE and maybe see the trends that you are seeing some due process and litigation over. All right, and our last area, and you know, Beverly Hills is not unlike any other district around California who is struggling to provide these very vital services to your most needy students. But the money that you receive doesn't even come close to covering those costs. And so districts across the state have a general fund contribution to help provide those services for their students. You can take a look there. The most recent published statewide average is 64.5%. That was published in 16-17. One hasn't come out yet, at least that I'm aware of, for 17-18. And at the time, if you take a look at your 16-17 number, you were under that amount. And in fact, for 15-16, you were right in line with that. We don't know 17-18's numbers yet, but if you take a look between 16-17 and 17-18, you did have quite a bit of a jump from 63.6% to 70.5%. And even though we don't know the state average, that's always kind of gives you, you know, a moment to pause and say, what really made that difference? We know that a majority of our expenditure increases are driven in large part by people, right? The people that we have in place to implement the programs that we have in place. There's things like STIRS and PERS that are impacting you that you have no control over. Not only are they going to hit you on the personnel side in your general education, but they're going to hit you in special education as well. So just be aware of that. And in terms of this, really getting back to that strong position control system and having something in place again to really monitor the people that you have in place so that you can make those informed decisions as to, do I have somebody over here that, I can move rather than hiring a new position. So making sure that you have that strong position control system in place. We put down, consider moving that to the Business Services Department for budgeting purposes. And then having those monthly meetings between special education, human resources, and business services to really reconcile and make sure everybody is dealing with the same numbers when you are trying to make those informed decisions on what comes next. What kind of staffing decisions are we going to make, we feel is really integral to a fiscal consideration. All right, and I know I kind of breezed through that, but with that, I will take any questions that you may have.
Okay, we'll start down, Sean. I don't think these are working yet. Yeah, not yet. It's okay. So I don't know if this was found in the audit, but does our school, how early on do we start seeking out the students that do need special education help? Is it mostly at the middle school or elementary level, or is it also provided at the high
We
school?
didn't do an analysis that really broke it down by that, but you see students even down into preschool that are being referred for special education. And a majority of your special ed students are going to come from the general education setting. That's their first time being involved. Preschool, sometimes those students get identified prior to them ever being served in your district at the age of 3.
And do you usually need the families to reach out for their children in order to request
Can you say that
these?
one more time? I'm sorry, I missed the beginning of it.
No problem. Do families usually need to reach out, or does the school actively seek those students that do need help?
So it comes from both sides. Your district has an obligation to, is it called Seek and Serve? Search and Serve. There you go. There you go, Child Find. To actively seek out students before they come into their educational system. So that is happening on the district side, but then a lot of times, yes, you have parents that will bring those concerns to the school district, whether they do that through their general education teacher, whether they do that prior to them ever being a student on your campus.
Thank you.
Yes.
Okay. Mr. Spitz?
Well, this report, I'm so happy to have it. It's so comprehensive, and probably the most valuable audit report that I've seen since I've served on the board.
Thank you.
And I understand that our staff is addressing each of the recommendations you've made. I'm very, very interested in hearing the staff's response. Let me ask this: special ed is such an important service in this district. Actually, it accounts for in the neighborhood of 20% of our budget. And the percentage of students, as you indicated, that we have in this district in special education programs is higher than the state average. Let me ask you this. In one of the last slides you showed, you indicated general fund contribution, and the latest number in our district was 70.5% of budget. What does that mean? Does that mean that we are contributing 70.5%? The rest of it is from state?
So
or?
that means of all of your special education expenditures, 70.5% of that was going to be covered by your general fund. So the other 29.5% of that was covered by the money that you received, both state and federal
Right.
resources.
Right.
Yes. Okay.
Um,
And the reason it says budget there is because at the time that we were here, you had not closed out 17, 18. So that's what was projected in the budget that you would contribute
Right.
70.5%.
we know that we must and we want to provide the services that are needed by our special education students.
Yeah.
I'm wondering if all the recommendations that you've made were met, how would that affect our costs and our budget?
That's a great question. And unfortunately, you can't quantify every single one of those. Let me just tell you. So most of the people within our organization come from the fiscal side of the house. I am the one person in FIC Math that comes from the program side of the house. So I was an elementary school teacher, principal, superintendent. I worked for a county office providing support to school districts before I went to work for FIC Math. One of the things that is near and dear to my heart is interventions that you put in place early for students who are struggling. If you don't have a systemized approach to providing intervention and support for struggling students, then the only recourse is for them to funnel their way into special education. And it's much easier to put an intervention in place and close the gap early on than wait for a student to be years behind, 2-3 years behind. That's difficult to address that at that time. So, you know, in terms of, yes, we have lots of recommendations in here. I truly do believe that you have to have something in place to meet the needs of struggling students in general education prior to them ever getting to special education. And then that will have one of the biggest impacts if you can close the gap early prior to them getting to that special education support.
Thank you.
Okay.
Tristan?
This provides a really remarkable roadmap at a time that's super critical for our district. We're reconfiguring and we're looking at our curriculum. At the same time, we're getting this incredibly helpful roadmap of where we need to close the gap and support. So, you know, I think it was incredibly timely. It was gratuitous that we started it when we did, because now we can see the areas that we need to focus on while we rebuild what the future of our district is going to look like. So I think it's very comprehensive, but thank you for your time and for the
Thank you.
detail that's been included. And I'm very happy with it.
Well, Mel took one of the words out of my mouth, and that was the word comprehensive. When I picked up this document and started to read it, and this is what led to what we saw on the board up there, I looked at it and I was amazed at how comprehensive it was. And having been a teacher in the school, I could relate to a lot of these things very easily. Unfortunately, as I read it, and then I went back and looked at the caveat of we didn't really put in anything in there about what was good about the district. And
Yes.
having finished reading this, I thought to myself, are we doing anything right?
Absolutely, you are.
I was really dumbfounded by the report, but I do believe we do some things right, and I think
Absolutely.
we should really, take a back seat. I think we do a lot of things, but it does prove to us that we do have a lot of things left to do.
Yes.
And I'm hoping that we can, and now that we have the report and I'm sure that some of the things are being done already, I would like to think that we might really, when we reconfigure, take all these issues into place. There were a couple points that came to mind. I wanted to ask you, did you interview any parents on this while you did this study?
I don't believe we did. Do you remember?
I don't see anything in there
Parents?
about parents.
I don't believe so.
There were a few people we interviewed that had children
Yes.
here with special needs in the district.
Oh, you
And
did?
so they offered that information from that perspective as well.
Okay, I just was curious if there were any parent input. And a couple of, I outlined a couple of these things that really hit my mind and really hit me was one on, I believe it was on page 10. Excuse me for looking for this, but
No problem.
the one that says, and this is one that, because I was involved in education, was examining and the determining factors of eligibility for everything. I really, the way you studied it, and I saw the differences across the school district from one school to another.
Yes.
So it always amazed me. And another thing that was important was teacher training in handling all of this. I feel that was,
Absolutely.
as a teacher, I felt that was very weak. And to serve all of the students was very important to me. And one of the things that we need to work on is when we have the other teacher come into the classroom and teach. Some of the problems with that is the ability of that teacher to teach the way that the regular teacher teaches. And that teacher is not usually that qualified. And that was a problem that I observed when I was.
And there has to be time for that collaboration, right? So a lot of times you go into this fast and furious, and they're supporting, but they're not collaborating to provide the best support. So that's always very important as well.
We could address.
Yeah.
As I say, it was an amazing report, and you are to
Thank
be
you.
congratulated.
Thank you.
So first of all, thank you. I agree with all the comments that have been made by everyone to my right. And I've broken up my comments into 3 sections. I know that I asked earlier over the weekend if staff was going to be offering solutions. And so I've been told, and we've been told, that this is going to come back to the board for more discussion and at a future date. And today's purposes for discussion was really to discuss the actual the findings, the recommendations that you've made. And so one of the things that I think is interesting to point out is that as Mrs. Walker-Schuman, did I get that right? Or is it, yes, Walker-Schuman said, was that this comes at a very interesting time for our district as we're looking to reconfigure. And one of the findings or recommendations was to really have special ed, our purpose, our mission for special ed to be integrated into our strategic plan. And so we are, I think it's really helpful to know that recommendation was made, because we are having a strategic plan that is under development. And so I think that for those two to meet at this time is really not only critical, but I think it will be so progressive for this district as we move forward. The enrollment, I think it's interesting that for this district, while you said that enrollment has held steady, or the numbers for special ed have held more or less the same, our enrollment in general has declined in this district. So I'm not sure if the districts you compared us to were also experiencing the same, and I'm just going to assume that they weren't. I can't
speak to that at this
because
time.
I don't know if you compared us in that regard to La Cañada. I think they're experiencing growth slightly, but still growth, where we're on the decline. Yeah. And I'm not sure if that was.
And really, that was to get the comparison districts was really a snapshot in time.
Okay.
So you look at ed data to pull in districts with like qualities, and that's where we look at that. We didn't necessarily look for the declining enrollment, so I can't speak particularly to that.
And yet, our costs have increased.
And identification rate.
Even though you declined in enrollment, your percentage rate of identifying students remained
the same.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
usually we see spikes because of just the simple math of general ed enrollment, more special ed.
And as far as the board is concerned, I saw that on page 15, there was a recommendation the district should update board policy 6145.5 and develop supporting administrative regulation to include a district-wide process with forms, timelines, data collection, and review progress, monitoring, and training. So I think that's something that's incumbent upon the board to do, and we should probably, execute that. And there was a second recommendation for the board to adopt policy to acknowledge the importance of intervening as early as possible when a student indicates signs of academic challenges, leadership by the Ed Services Department, and the implementation of response to instruction. So all that, I think, is incumbent upon the board. So I'd ask President Margot to, I don't know, I guess we have to work with Mrs. Chisholm to develop that policy, but that should probably happen sooner than later. The other thing is and I guess this is more for staff as we go forward from this discussion to the next, is you said not everything can be done. You can't look at this, and there's a lot of recommendations, as Mr. Spitz pointed out. And so, where do we go from here? So I think for the board, it would be helpful if staff prioritizes, a few, and goals that we want to do short term and then long term. And along those lines, I know that it's raining, and it's probably not a convenient day for parents to be here. But often, as a board member, I'm often asked about special ed, and some of the things that parents have pointed out as concerns, and teachers, are really validated by your report. So I can now turn around and I'd like to share this report more with with more parents, more stakeholders in our community. And so I'm wondering if there would be, and I talked to Mrs. Chisholm about this, we should really try to have a conversational board meeting so that we could identify, just share with the community, look, we did this report, here's what they recommended, here are the findings, and here's our priorities once we have those in place, Mrs. Chisholm. And so that way it just confirms the roadmap that we are taking, the proactive position that this board is taking and administration to address some of the issues and findings. So I'm not sure if I have support for that, but I think that that would be a good way of planning for the future. And finally, the student support part for me, one of the things, again, the incoming from parents has been that there is no high school intervention not happening for all struggling students. How does staff intend to fix this? So, and the timeline. This has been a question because often parents ask, if there is a student who is enrolled in the general program at the high school and is at this, getting a C or struggling, what interventions are there to make sure that that student is carried to the next level or remains consistent and not drop down? And so I think that that's one area that we really need to focus as we move forward, because we want to make sure that students are given an opportunity to succeed and not start their academic career at the high school, especially with deficits where they're not being supported in the way that they should, so that they could have academic success, because they should be able to thrive. And so, again, just to reiterate, I think that those were the areas. And number 15, let's see, staff interviews indicated. Let's see here. There was one more. Oh, yeah, this one was important. There was no collaboration time provided for general education teachers and special ed teachers to support students effectively. So I think that should be considered, and I leave it to staff to decide what the priorities will be, but I thought that that was one that was really critical. Yes. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Hacker. Thank you both for coming and presenting. My colleagues have said a lot. I had a couple thoughts for the above average identification rates that you found within our district on certain diagnoses. Do you find that to be a trend that's common or stronger? Yeah. Now, you didn't look at obviously all school districts. You took sampling.
No, each school district honestly is very unique in terms of their trends for identification rates. And so a lot of times we just like to highlight what the particular trend is for your district, and a number of things can impact that. One year, I not to say that this is Beverly Hills in any way, but I had a new school psychologist join my particular school site. They had a background in autism, and it was amazing how many of my IEPs autism was popping up because that was something that they truly focused on. So that was my experience. That has nothing to do with Beverly Hills. But just by highlighting that, then maybe you can take a look at what's the eligibility. Is it certain school sites where you're seeing more things identified? Would you be able to put your finger on particular trends within your district that is affecting those identification rates?
Right, and that's exactly my point, is as we study maybe an action plan to address these, and I'll ask staff a question in a second, that early intervention concept, I think, deals with this as well, because you can kind of see, I think if you're experienced enough, you can see it coming down the pike. If students are performing a different way, achieving, not achieving, what you're eventually going to get to, and try to discover what is innate to our district that keeps leading to that particular diagnosis or the reasons for that IEP. I assume the idea of reconfiguration was brought up a couple of times. I assume that's going to play a huge role in addressing the concerns. So I'm curious to see how that comes out. I would ask Ms. Chisholm and Dr. Breggy, is there anything in the report that stood out as something that you completely do not agree with, or that's worth noting? Because as we look at moving forward with the action plans, with the discussion of how we're going to address these issues, is there something that we're not going to be seeing because it's just not possible here, or it's not feasible financially, or it's just, is there, and the answer could be none. I'm just curious.
For me, just the staffing.
Okay.
We do have a different ratio, but we also have different population, different communities. So
Okay.
Just want to bring that to the forefront. But other than that, I'm not.
Okay.
Most of these
So
things were things that were already on my radar.
So the reduction in staffing is not something you're looking at as a major player in these.
Not if we want to meet these recommendations.
Okay. All right. That's good. And then the other thing I often ask is you know.
Let me just be specific, Mr. Margot. I'm talking about district office staff, not staffing at sites. That's different. We're going to address that through reconfiguration.
Okay. I thought it was all staffing, but whatever.
No, specifically they were saying that
Okay.
the report said that we had 6 staff at the district office, where the average was 3 in like districts.
Okay. Got it.
That's what I was addressing.
Understood. The idea of what defines struggling is something that for students, I know this is a special ed audit, but you know, so many students move through the system and graduate and never have experienced any support through special ed. Wasn't really on either the parents' radars or the teachers' radars because the student was doing okay. And I think that as we move forward, if there's a effective way, cost-effective way, to say, you know what, students who are consistently getting C's in mathematics, okay, they're passing, but they're struggling. And every year they get a C, or every semester they get a C, it's going to make it harder to learn the new material, and it's going to compound itself. And I don't think we think about that often because you know, C's are accepted. And although they may be accepted through, you know, on paper, let's say, it's exactly, C is for consequences. Thank you, Mrs. Hacker. There are severe consequences with letting people, you know, they talk about, oh, they skated through the system. You know, they got through the system. They passed, they graduated, they got through the system. We shouldn't be proud of that. We should absolutely make it our mission to ensure that the students that are getting educated at a higher value, a higher kind of a bar for themselves, that we expect that, you know, and that a C is a sign of struggling, of somebody that a student that needs some sort of intervention or attention, may not be special ed, but at least we talked about intervention. You know, the board has had intervention programs in the past. I don't know where we are this year with it, but it seems to be morphing every year. But we recognize the importance of early intervention, of K-5 intervention. Anyway, so I look forward to circling back with this, perhaps in a conversational meeting if necessary, so that more people can be apprised of how we're addressing these issues. I happen to think, you know, the same people come anyway, but to hold it wouldn't hurt. Thank you very much,
Mr. Margot.
everybody. Yes, Mr. Spitz.
If you please, I'd like to revisit just for a moment, the question about our general fund contribution.
Sure.
It's 70.5% that we contribute to the cost. The statewide average, according to the report, is 64.5%. That's a difference of 6%. I wonder if you realize how much that 6% is costing us. It's costing us about $600,000 a year, that differential. And so I'm going to ask staff, I'm sure that there are reasons why we contribute more to the total cost than the average in the state. And when you respond to this report, perhaps you can give us some information on that.
Absolutely.
So just to make sure I understood this, I'm piggybacking on what both of you had said, Mrs. Chisholm and Mr. Spitz. Are we saying that we're overstaffed in the 6 positions at the district, or is it in general? Is that what you just said, Mrs. Chisholm? So
They were
that's a
looking at-
contributor.
They were looking at staffing at the district office level.
So that would be one
Yeah,
element.
so there were different portions to the report. So we had staffing and caseloads for your instructional level, right? We had staffing for paraeducators that we looked at. We also had staffing at the central office to support what happens in special education. And that's what Ms. Chisholm was referring to, is that at the time that we were here, your organizational chart, the way it was plotted, you had 6 positions to support special education. 1 was vacant at the time. So at the time, you had 5 in reality. And the average for the 3 like districts were 3. So that's what she was referring to. Yeah.
Sure. I know, and that's, yeah, that's, I was going to say that.
We have a parent population that's fairly active in their children's academic success, and from personal experience, when we see our children struggling, we intervene, and we offer support, and we sit and help them with homework, and we bring in tutors. So I think it's rather often that children are getting B's or C's in classes, or 3s or 4s in the K-5 that are struggling and need support and need help in the school environment, but it hasn't met the threshold that's been determined by, I don't know who, to be perfectly honest, that the child is not accessing the curriculum, and I think we can do a better job of really evaluating even kids that are getting B's or C's. Are they actually doing that of their own accord, or are they doing that because of the supports that the parents have put into place? And if we take a more proactive role in trying to support the kids early on, perhaps we can see a little bit less of that struggle as they go through middle and high school.
Thank you.
And I should have done this earlier, but I told Dr. Kirk Martinez I was going to ask her if I left anything out. Was there anything you wanted to add? I apologize. I should have done that. Okay.
Can you come up to the mic?
When you went back, sir, to the contribution factor, you'll know on page 47, you can do a comparison in-house how much it's costing to serve on an average special education student versus how much it costs to educate a general education student in general ed. It's always people first. Right now, it's costing about, well, in 16-17, $22,000 per student. Now, some students are speech only, and some have more significant specialized needs, but you'll be able to do that comparison. What can be done in the district to look at where are the increases occurring? Is it strictly in certificated? Is it in classified? Is it in the operations? That would be your non-public schools, non-public agencies, and you can look at the trend to see that. Because you have your maintenance of effort documents. The other thing I wanted to piggyback on when it was being discussed more intensively was why are the identification rates so high? What's the contributing factor? Developing a data collection sheet for each site, looking at how many SSTs were completed. Did they have a second SST? What interventions were in place through the RTI? And then how many of those referrals those students needed to be assessed? And then of that assessment, how many were eligible and how many were not eligible for special education? And if you do that by site, you know the psychologists, you know the teachers, you know the principals, the teachers, general ed teachers, and you'll be able to look at those trends as well. And then making sure that all of the staff who assess have the most updated instruments or assessment tools, as well as comprehensive assessments. Then you'll know your eligibility is very accurate for your own community. And the last thing I wanted to bring up is there are a lot of recommendations. Usually, this is a 2 to 4 or a 3 to 5 year strategic plan that is developed. It's not going to happen in a year or 18 months. So I did want to state that on behalf of, district offices taking these recommendations and going, where do we start? So
If we just prioritize 3 or 4 things
Exactly.
a year, we could probably accomplish those in 4 years, 5 years.
I think it'll be interesting once the district comes back and reports out on what's happened since we've been here. I think you're going to see just in little conversations we've had that lots of things are already being put in place. So that's exciting to see. So thank you so much for inviting us
Thank you
back.
so much.
It's nice
Good to see you
Thank you
all.
both.
Good luck with the rest of your school year.
Stay dry out there. I didn't. Okay. Moving right along. Next presentation.
Bernadette Lucas is going to talk to us about safety and security within our technology systems. Certainly, you can't turn on the news today without hearing about all the breaches in what's happening with our technology, including school districts that are very close to us. So I'll turn this over to Ms. Lucas.
Thank you. And thank you so much, Josh. Thank you. So I would like to share with our community that, first of all, good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
Good evening. I would like to share with our community that this notion of student and staff data privacy and security is a complex one. And the intention of tonight's presentation is to create a foundation for understanding around what privacy and security, first of all, is. I think it's really important for me to share that it's highly likely that I will be in front of you every month to 2 months because of the depth of what needs to be done in the district around privacy and security. So again, tonight's purpose is to educate and inform so that we can chart a path forward to fortify our student and staff data privacy and security. So our next slide. Okay, so a quick overview of the presentation is what I'm doing now. I'm going to talk about IT and cybersecurity. What is student and staff data privacy and security? There's a lot of misunderstanding in the field around what that is, what the federal and state laws have to do with the data that we share and have about our students. What data do we share with educational apps and why? The training around all of this is critical. And then lastly, the path that I'm recommending we take to fortify our privacy and security, okay? And so I want to start with the idea that we do need to implement a process or engage in a process that allows us to develop policy around student data privacy and security. I cannot emphasize the importance of this enough. On a scale of 1 to 10, it's a 15 as far as I'm concerned. COSIN is a national organization that is highly regarded. It is the premier K-12 IT organization in the nation, and they have developed a pathway to support school districts ensuring up their data privacy and security practices. What does this have to do with our entire technology plan? As a district and as a nation, really, we have implemented a lot of instructional technology. I think everyone in the room knows that over the last year and a half, we've implemented a one-to-one program in K-12, and we're starting to implement that at the high school. That necessitates fortification of privacy and security. There's no way around that. The district's technology department has been talking about this for 11 to 12 months, and it must be a district foci, is my recommendation. So that seal that you see there, the TLE, is kind of the center point. If we complete the steps in that process, and if the community might remember, I attached to the board agenda what that process is, so I won't bore everyone with that tonight. But these 3 boxes here, legal compliance, the practice elements that were outlined in the attachments I shared, and ongoing improvement. So this notion of legal compliance, there are federal and state laws that govern what we do that we must comply with. And I'm going to get back to that in a second. And then the practice elements are the foundational pieces that a district, if the district engages in those, would have created a very sound practice around privacy and security. And then lastly, this notion of ongoing improvement means that as a district, we need to monitor what we're doing with data privacy and security, not only monitor it, audit it, and revise and improve it at all times, probably every 6 to 12 months. What are the goals and how we accomplish these goals? So the idea of compliance is to me, minimum. So our parents, our teachers, our students, our staff, and certainly the board knows that it's critical that we follow law and implement board policy and all of that. We want to minimize or eliminate harm to students in regard to sensitive data. And lastly, we want the perception of our school community to be not only the perception, but the reality that we take this very seriously and we're doing what is necessary to protect our students' data. And I submit to you our staff's data because we have that also. And so while compliance is important, we know that I submit that it's critical that we create an atmosphere of trust around this work. Our parents, our community knows that we have a lot of data. And what are we doing to protect their children's data? And our staff has every right to have the same confidence in what we're doing as a district. So I would like to raise the bar around this, not just comply with the law, but really put policy in place that creates a sense of confidence and trust in what we're doing around data. We will do that through concrete policies and practices that we need to create and implement in short order. We need to communicate this out to the community clearly, effectively, and frequently. And we need to provide and apply appropriate protections. The law affords us how to do that, but we need to go beyond that. And if we do all of those things, we should earn the trust of our stakeholders. I think it's important that I share that this, not unlike the FitMap piece that we just heard about, will take some time, but there are elements that we have prioritized as a department that need to be done and quickly. What is the difference between privacy and security? I'm not going to read to everyone, but they're the definitions, and they are different. So when we talk about privacy, we're talking about protection of data. And I'm sorry, when we talk about security, we talk about protection of data from unauthorized usage. When we talk about privacy, that means that we have implemented practices that, for lack of a better word, protect the information we have at our disposal, what the industry calls, the term of art is personally identifiable information. In other words, if I had a set of data on Dr. Breggy, that would allow me to do some stuff. And we want to,
imagine that.
With Dr. Breggy. So we want to eliminate any possibility of that. Now, I am going to say, and I think this is really important, if government agencies have been breached, K-12 agencies can be breached, right? So there's a map with the Federal Department of Education that shows which districts in the nation have been breached. So this is not a reflection that those districts necessarily did something inherently wrong, because there are bad actors out there on the dark web, blah, blah, blah. All they do all day long is look for vulnerabilities in different organizations, not just school districts. What school districts are called to do is make sure that they have practices and policies in place that minimize that threat significantly. And if something were to happen, that there's a plan in place to inform the community and act quickly to remedy whatever happened. Okay, so for our board members and our community, you may have noticed in the document, the slide deck that was published through the board agenda, that one of our attorneys would be here to speak to this. She was unable to be here tonight. She will be here on February 19th. But what she was going to share was around the federal and state law that govern student data. So again, I'm not going to read this to you. This is in your slide deck, but most people know about FERPA. That's the one everyone hears. But these others are just as critically important, and you can see in their title, their names, what they are. So we have FERPA, COPA, SEPA, PPRA, and SOPIPA, which is the others. The first ones are federal law. The last one, SOPIPA, is state law. California has done a lot and is recognized throughout the nation, has done a lot around student data privacy and security. And it's incumbent upon us to take to heart what they've done. I'm not going to play this video right now because I'm assuming that no one wants to watch it. But it is very informative. If you want to watch it tonight when you get home, I invite you to do that, or anytime in the future. It goes over privacy and security as it pertains to K-12. And for us visual learners, that's very helpful. What data do we share with educational apps and why? The data is generally specifically related to what the kids are learning, right? Often it includes some of their PII, so that teachers and administrators, both site and district level, can track that data and use it for instructional purposes only. That's the point of all of this. Personal identifiable information. So the overarching concept about why we even do this is that we need the data from these apps that we have vendored or created contracts with to move instruction. If the data is being shared for any reason other than that, it shouldn't be shared. One thing I'll say here is that as a district, a recommendation that I'm making, and if we go through the TLE process, that the data, the language and the contracts that we use with vendors around our students' data needs to be more specific. And I'm saying that straight out. And I'll have to work with our district's attorneys around that. There's a state organization made up of many districts in the state that has a document that will help us do that. But that is something that needs and must be done. We must start looking more closely at the language in our contracts around student data. Moving on, attached to the board agenda were the student data principles, so I hope everyone had a chance to review those. A huge piece of this is staff training, and I cannot emphasize enough, when we talk to our K-12 colleagues and experts in student data privacy and security, the #1 threat to data breaches is, can anybody guess? You want me to tell you? Ourselves. Internal stakeholders. So most breaches are because someone in the organization clicked in an email that they shouldn't click in. They left data on a desk that they shouldn't have left on a desk. They didn't shred a stack of papers that they should have shred. Now, should anybody be humiliated or called out over this? Not right now, maybe. Maybe. What we haven't done as a district yet is educate our internal stakeholders on what this means. Like in my opinion, and this is a teacher and me talking and the former principal, you can't hold people accountable for something that you have not built their competency in. So this is why I'm sharing with the community that a critical component of our student data privacy and security piece is staff training. And we can make that as engaging as we possibly can. It's going to involve some ongoing support to staff so that they're educated around this piece, but we owe that to them, and we owe it to our parents and our community at large to be able to say, we have trained our internal stakeholders to protect your children's data. And there's no way around that. That's not going to happen in an email. I can't educate people about this through an email. It's ineffective. This requires engagement because it's such a new thing for most of us. So what training has our technology department engaged in to help support this effort? So I mentioned to you COSIN, which is I invite you to look it up. They're highly regarded. And so a lot of our training has been through that organization. As I mentioned, the state of California has taken on a huge responsibility around this to support K-12 districts in educating their stakeholders around this work. So members of our team have engaged in that professional development. That professional development has prepared us to train our internal stakeholders. And with the support of Dr. Brege, he's made it very clear to me that he wants this done. And we'll work out how that'll be done. And it'll be brought back to the board for support and or approval, whatever is appropriate. What is the COSIN Trusted Learning? Forgive me, that S should be capitalized. Trusted Learning Environment Seal. So this seal means that the district has gone through a deliberate, transparent, clear process to develop and implement policy and procedure around digital privacy of student data. And if we follow that process, we would have done a very solid job in shoring up privacy and security for this district. Almost all, right now, all of the districts that are COSIN Trusted Learning Environment sealed are East Coast and Midwest schools. We would be among the first California schools to get this done. And I have to say, as with most things in instructional technology, the wave starts on the East Coast and for some reason it moves west. I hope that changes and that the West Coast becomes leaders in some of this work, but we can learn from our East and Midwest colleagues and take this process seriously. And I think if you reviewed it, you'll see that we could almost not go wrong if we do this. What I'm asking, I've reached out and am reaching out to my colleagues in other districts to form a cohort with the superintendent and the board's approval to finish this process. Okay. The process cost $100 for us to be involved in. I thought that was a steal. But we're also, our district is a member of this organization. So membership for us, because of the size of our district, I think was $195. And it affords us all these resources that allows us, so I don't have to make anything up. And then my recommendations, and we're moving to the end, thank you for your patience, include, among other things, this application for COSA Trusted Learning Environment seal. I mean, I have it there as one box, but it's really like 50 boxes because there's so many things to do under that process. But the overarching, if you reviewed the attachment to the board agenda, is that if we go through that process, we will be trusted learning environment sealed. And lastly, and I'll talk more about this later, Mrs. Hacker asked a really good question. Was I asking for approval for this next thing tonight? I am not. I am just submitting to the board for your consideration. So when I circle back to you later with the new technology plan for the 2019 through the 2022 school years, that we consider an assistant director or something of IT security. That's how critical this is. The IT piece. It's rare that I come to you all for a position that's not site-based, but that's how critical IT security is. So let's see, where am I? Okay, questions and answers. Oh my, thank you, sir.
Well, I'm sure that we're all agreed that data privacy and security is essential, and that it appears that there are weaknesses in our existing program.
Yes.
And that's not a good thing, and I would say that we have to have them fixed urgently. So I will support a proactive approach to that, because I want to get to the point where we can hold the technology department accountable for breaches that are avoidable.
Yes, I agree, Mr. Spitz. Thank you. Yes. That's a really great question. So we are currently not qualified for the seal. So I'm requesting, permission to pursue the seal. We have paid the $100 for access to the materials. So if the board, if they, after looking at the process, you feel like it's a solid one and you bless it, I will pursue it. Now, the way that the process is mapped out, I would secure those policies anyway, because we need to shore up our policies. But we could pursue the policies without earning the seal. But the seal means something. It means that you have done this. I forgot to mention something very important, and you may have noticed this in the materials. When you go through this process, COSA and that organization gives you feedback on how you did. Like data, okay, great, you did this, you earned the seal, but you still need to go back and do this, and they help you revisit it, I think, on an annual basis. So it's not just completing this process. You now belong to a community of professionals that hold you accountable and keeps you up to date on the latest in privacy.
And to get a person to keep the process going, you're suggesting that we hire another person in the IT department to make sure that we continue to monitor and keep this seal alive. In other words,
Yes.
back every year,
Right.
you're going to monitor us to see if we're still in compliance. Is that correct?
that's the perfect way to put it, Mrs. Marcus. And it's helping us get through this process, but it's also, there are other pieces that we need to work on. And that's true for any district. I don't want anyone to think we're like super vulnerable. It's not that. It's that we're at a place now in K-12 education, this is a national thing, that districts really need to start looking at this as Fortune 500 companies do and government agencies do. And we've not traditionally or historically had to do that. Thank you very much.
So I have a question and regarding the certification process. Who's actually undergoing that? Is it training or is it just through a series of applications?
Okay, great question, Ms. Hacker. So when you look at the process, it's developing policy around certain topics that relate to student data privacy and security. So that sounds almost like a clerical thing, but it's not, because you have to develop a policy, you have to research, you have to gather data, you have to vet, you have to examine your district's infrastructure, you have to look at the training you did for staff, the training you will do for staff. So it's more the end result is that you have these policies, but to get to those policies, you have to go through a lot of processes to develop the policy. Does that make sense?
Okay, so if we approve this today and we're just approving the certification, are we approving this? Are we giving you the go for the certification process?
The seal.
Okay, so here's the question, and it kind of piggies back a little bit on what Mrs. Marcus just mentioned. If we give the approval to go forward with the certification, who is going to be doing all of that process for us that you just described? Would that be you? Would that be the TOSAs, a collective? Or is this a person that doesn't exist right now? Because I need to be clear, because I'm not sold on the assistant director's position, because I don't understand what that person clearly, if we were to have that position in the future, would be doing more than just this. So I need to know, if we give the green light for this today, who will be doing that process for us today, and what is the timeline?
So I would start that process. The TOSAs that's not their role. Were I to engage them in that, I'm taking them away from teachers and students, and I won't do that. So it would be me, Chrissy Schaefer, who's her title is systems administrator, but she does much more than that, and members of our district office IT team. So, any position that's approved or not approved at a later date would kind of join in with us. But let's say you didn't approve the position, I would still need to get the work done. It would just take me, frankly, longer.
Well, what I don't want to happen is start something today and then have the board be told, well, you kind of, told us yes, and now you have to go forward. I want to be clear that that's not what's happening today. Because I'm happy to approve this. I don't want to hear that we can't finish and so let me ask you, can you finish this process of the certification without anybody else who's not here right now?
We can. It will take longer.
Okay, so what is your goal for timeline for doing this?
My goal is for us to be done by July or August of 2019.
Okay, can you do that with who's here now?
Yes. Yes.
Are you sure? Okay.
I am sure.
Okay, so then that's going to be something that I'm going to look to in getting this done.
I welcome that.
So, because I've been, I really want to be supportive of what we're doing, and I'm all for privacy, and I want to know how, we have an obligation to do that regardless, and so we should be committed to that. And so I think that this is reasonable, but I'm not ready to have that discussion or be married to a part two of something that we're not being presented to.
What's the part two?
An assistant director for technology.
Oh, yeah. We're going to circle back with that. But I wanted to introduce it now because it's relevant to my presentation.
I understand,
Yeah.
but I want to be very transparent about where I'm at with that, because this position, there's been a lot of evolution with technology for this district, and it's going so fast. And we have reconfiguration. We have a lot going on with facilities. And so I would say that we really should be a little bit more, we should probably try to focus. It'd be easier in the next few months to just really ideally focus on reconfiguration, facilities, and then whatever we have to consent to on the consent calendar. Farther from that, I think for me, it's hard to see the big picture, because then I have to go and ask all these questions, and it takes time from you to answer, and it's just a back and forth. And so I hope you understand where I'm coming from. I'm happy to do the certification, but this other thing with the assistant of technology, I'm not there yet. Just because I don't understand all the rest.
You've to support what you're saying, you've not been given everything to support it, like a job description, what else would be involved in the position. So that person would not only be doing this. I will say that after I share all of that with you, if it's decided that that position will not be approved, that has implications and consequences that I'll share at a later time. Okay. It's just a decision. It's priorities and values.
Not to start and finish this.
Not to start and finish this. I have to get this done. It just would be done more quickly and in a way that I frankly feel more confident with, because I have so much going on. But I'll get it done. It's just my nature. And I'm not pulling the toasters to do it.
No, I understand.
Yeah.
Clarifying that,
Yes.
I wasn't sure.
Okay.
You said we.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Bernadette. I want to piggyback on something that Ms. Hacker said. It was a concern. I wrote something down. I'm assuming that having this seal, having this certification, is not. It's more like an A rating at a restaurant. You know, you could still choose to go in the restaurant, whether it has the A or the B, or whether we have the seal or not is not going to make or break people enrolling in the district.
That's correct.
Okay. So it once again seems like it's verging on the concept of a luxury that I don't know if we can afford, but in this instant, I'm thinking about time, not money. With the statement about reconfiguration, my concern is that we are going to take on these little projects now, which the only thing we should be taking on is reconfiguration. It, in and of itself, it's enough of a project. That for me, I would love if we were working on this on August 1st, right? Because we have a deadline of, let's say, around July 31st to do everything. So, and you said you can get this done by July. But the problem is you're pulling staff right now to put time and energy into this, and we know from hearing just from Pam Johnson's presentation the work that's entailed into reconfiguring this district. I don't believe with the skeletal staff that you have time to do both. I really don't. Plus, we have ongoing technology issues that don't go away when you're running a school district on a daily basis. That those have to be attended to also. So is it wise for us to begin this now? Is this necessary to begin this now? I understand the need for it. Is it something that we need to do now?
So that I appreciate you and Mrs. Hacker being so sensitive to what's going on with my department. Oh, you and Mrs. Hacker.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, because I thought you were also being
you
sensitive.
started the ball rolling.
Right.
She was giving
Oh,
you
you
some
thought I said
credit.
Mr. Hacker.
You and
Okay,
Take the
Mrs.
credit.
Hacker,
Take the
Mr. Margot.
I
I am getting hot. So I think that's a really great question. I mean, the cabinet members know me. When something's really important, I feel a sense of urgency around it. Like to me, data privacy and security, it's been biting me on the ankles, I feel like, for 12 months. And when I look at other districts and what has happened to those districts, I've become incredibly concerned for our own district. If it pleases the board, I'll go back and talk to Dr. Breggy and cabinet and assess in the context of what you just said, forward movement. I want to be thoughtful about what you just said to me.
I appreciate that. And it's not just your department, by the way.
Right.
It's we have to consider this across the board. I mean,
Yes.
I would say the same thing to Mr. Seaman if he brought in, hey, let's pilot a new program right now. Whoa. Whoa. Right, which makes me wonder why we are taking on these monumental tasks that if, as you say, will take you through the next 7 months. We have something else on the burners that are going to go for the next 7 months. And I think, and I have to tell you, I think I could speak for all of us, we are very invested with the success of this reconfiguration. Everybody up here is, including yourself. So do we want to implement anything and approve anything that could distract staff from being successful at the task at hand? It's a practical thing. Listen, I can't tell my own child to do two things at once. Okay?
Yes.
Can you take out the trash and walk the dog?
Right.
Oh, okay, I took the trash out. And walk the dog. Okay? So I understand our human fallacy in multitasking.
Right.
I want it out there so Dr. Breggy understands my feeling on it. I would say if you're looking for board approval tonight for this,
Right.
I would say get all your reconfiguration ducks in a row and have at it.
Okay.
That's what I would say.
Okay.
But for me, if this interrupts the success of that reconfiguration, I don't think it's paramount at this moment. Now, there are you were mentioning certain policies that need to be looked at and stuff. If there's legal issues that have to protect the district immediately because of some concerns that we have, those need to be addressed. I'm not going to be blind to those. I'm wise. But as far as the entire COSIN seal process of approval, that's my feeling.
Mr. Margot.
Pleases the board. May I confer with Dr. Breggy and come back to you?
Pleases me. I'm not going to speak for my colleagues.
So
Yeah,
if I can just add one thing, though.
I have a different take than Mr. Margot.
Okay.
Absolutely, our number one objective and responsibility is to get reconfiguration done and done successfully on time.
Yes.
We don't have an alternative. It's a must. But I am going to say that I think that data privacy and security, I think that has to be, we should be able to do that, and it should not interfere with the reconfiguration project. And that's what I want to hear, is will moving forward to improve our data privacy and security, need that interfere with our reconfiguration program? That's a question I'm asking you.
Yes, sir. I was reflecting as I was listening to you. So perhaps there's a middle ground, and that's maybe what Mr. Margot just said, and that's prioritizing the policies and procedures that are urgent and right up on us. What I could do is, based on that TLE process, is map out all the policy and procedure we need to work on, and then prioritize it with a draft timeline. And I could code the policy red, green, and yellow if that is helpful. Yes, ma'am.
I will, when you're doing the reconfiguration, in my opinion, how much of what would apply to getting the seal or doing that would be tied into the reconfiguration?
Okay. Mrs. Marcus, if I could take that back and reflect on and really look at the process and come back when I come back with a plan, do you mind if I do that? If I reflect and think, okay.
Maybe there's some stuff that's in the reconfiguration that could be tied in with this process.
Right.
And if I could just reassure the board that the conversation that you're asking us to have about some of the work, we are having. There are several initiatives that are happening throughout the district, and so we've had really, I'll put it, very passionate conversations about how do you, is there an initiative that we're working on that has been paid for, or one that's well on its way? Is there one that could be briefly paused? We are having those conversations because we also agree that the reconfiguration work needs to be the priority. I think what's hard is, former teachers and principals, and there's this sense of responsibility when it comes to the data breaches that are happening, and then in school districts. So we just want to balance with that. We don't want to be reactive. We want to be out there and in front, but at the same time, we also need to understand that we have a huge project that we're working on.
So to follow up with what Mrs. Hacker said, so given the feedback from the board, Mrs. Hacker, if you would release me from the July-August commitment until I can go back and look, since you said you would hold me accountable.
No, I'm sorry, let me clarify what I meant by that.
Yes.
What I don't want to happen is for the board, let's say in 2 or 3 months,
Right.
Staff comes to us and says, we are, in the midst of securing this certification, and so we need this assistant director to finalize or implement the program.
Yeah.
Because now we're halfway there, right? So we conceived an idea, and now it has to come to fruition. So that's, I just wanted to be clear with me that that is not what I'm doing today.
I see. Right.
And so if you come back to me and say, we absolutely need that assistant director, then that's no for me, because you just made a commitment that you're able to do this without that assistant director.
What? Just to be clear.
I want to be clear.
Right.
We're reconfiguring.
Uh-huh.
Costs, and we're looking at our general budget, and I know this is for students, but the certification, the outcome is for students.
Mm-hmm.
Assistant director, I'm not.
No.
This is a new idea that just, flew by me over the weekend. So, I have more to say when that happens.
Mm-hmm.
I'll study the information that I'm given, but that's where this was coming. So
Got it.
I'm
Mm-hmm. 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 Absolutely. Mm-hmm. I appreciate that. And just as a point of clarification for you and for the community, that position would be so much more than what this TLE process is, but I'll share that with you at a later date. I just didn't want to spring it on you later without some opening salvo, so to speak. Okay. Thank you all. I appreciate it. I'm not going anywhere.
I know.
Up next, I think. Thanks, Josh. So, as with the privacy and security presentation, there are attachments to the board agenda that I will not specifically go over right now. I'm going to focus on this slide deck. I think the attachments speak for themselves. For the community, this slide deck was uploaded about today because of when we found out we were going to do the presentation, but it is on the board agenda, though posted late. I want to make that clear. It was probably, you were enclosed when it was posted, Mrs. Hacker. Based on the questions you sent, I had to revise it in order to answer your questions. So we found out Thursday that we were doing the presentation. Is that correct, Dr. Breggy? Late Thursday.
Yes, and the reason behind the kind of impromptu presentation is just that there were several questions that were coming up, and so we wanted to address them publicly so that everybody was getting the same update and message.
Absolutely. But I did want to make that clear to the community. Before I launch into this presentation, I want to share something. I think it was last week. It seems like a lifetime ago now, but last week I think it was that Mrs. Hacker contacted me because there had been feedback around Schoology and how it had been selected. And Ms. Hacker, I hope that I'm not speaking out of school, so to speak. And she said to me, Bernadette, the contract wasn't posted on the board agenda. And I think I was, to use a word, adamant that it had been based on some information I'd been given. And I met with Mrs. Hacker in my office last week. We talked about all the concerns that had come her way, and I think the way of other board members. And we circled back to the notion of the contract having been attached to the board agenda. I remain confident that it had been. She asked me to turn my laptop around and open the agenda. And I was sharing with my colleagues earlier, it's like a scene out of a horror movie, when the camera goes, and it wasn't there. And so I want to publicly state that I'm accountable for that. I'm responsible for that. That has nothing to do with Dr. Breggy or anybody else on cabinet. I forensically went back to try to figure out how that happened. I think the board members who have worked with me during my time here know that I've brought much smaller things to the board. I have no fear about doing that. You all have been incredibly supportive. Your questions help inform the community. I don't know how it happened. I put a step in place to make sure it doesn't happen again, and I apologize for that. And I would like to use tonight to remedy the fact that somehow it didn't come to board. So I want to be transparent about that. To make it clear to the community, last spring, almost a year ago now, we presented to the board a couple of times on the LMS and requested permission to proceed with an RFP. We canceled RFP, but still continued with our selection process, which I'm going to speak to this evening. Between that time in implementing the selection process and the time we rolled Schoology out, it did not come back to the board. So to give context to the presentation tonight, I will be addressing what I would have addressed had we done that, but I'm also updating you on where we're at with the presentation right now. Okay. Any questions about that before I proceed or concerns?
Yes.
Yes, ma'am, sir.
So we're into item 8D, an update on Schoology.
Yes, Mr. Spitz.
Can you address the problems that there have been on Schoology and why, and how you're going to overcome them?
Yes, and that's part of this presentation. That's part of this presentation. I'll be getting to that a little later in the slide deck. Is that okay, Mr. Spitz? Okay. So just as a reminder, this document went out to the district when we first started the process for selecting even thinking about a learning management system. So this should look familiar to everyone in the room, I hope, if you were here last year. We shared this timeline. This information is all on the district website and has been there for some time. If you go to the district's website, click departments, click technology, there's a whole page with FAQs, timelines,
and the process by which we secured or procured the LMS. So that's that. Just as a reminder, this was the original RFP and this table of contents to give you a sense of where we were going with it. This all happened last spring and into the early summer. I'm going to pause here because this is something that may not be as familiar as the previous slides. So we implemented what I consider an incredibly rigorous process for selecting an LMS. This scoring sheet that you see here shows the weights that were put on different elements of selecting the LMS. So you'll see, for example, vendor qualifications was 15%. So that's basically that, you know, they present with a background, a resume that they even should be playing the game of submitting for an LMS. The next section, features and use, is, as you can see, 30%. And that speaks to, will the LMS work in our environment, the Beverly Hills infrastructure? Do our users, who are mostly teachers, find it usable and intuitive and all of that? Implementation integration is also at 30%, meaning, you know, after we select it, are we going to have support moving forward with the LMS? Data integration refers to its ability to work with ARIES, which is our student information system. If an LMS did not have the capability to work with ARIES, we could not choose it. So that was a big thing. Price was 15%. And then responsiveness to us was 10%, and that went to a total of 100%. So when the vendors competed for the LMS, they all competed against this criteria, and that's really important to know. So getting into some of the questions that we've received, who participated in this process? So we started by working with mostly teachers. The vast majority were teachers, and just for the community to know, and our board, and to be reminded really, we sent out several emails. It was in Staff Connection, inviting teachers to participate in identifying the criteria for any LMS. At that point, we hadn't selected one. We just wanted to make sure that the LMS that we advertised for, the criteria that we had outlined, was based on what teachers wanted and knew their students and parents needed. So that piece was a distinct phase of the selection process, just identifying the characteristics the LMS should have and the components it should have. So that happened. After that happened, we brought many of the same teachers back for what we called the sandbox. So after we put on the street the advertisement that we wanted an LMS, we had vendors respond. When they responded, they went through that criteria piece that I just showed you. Based on that, we ended up with 3 from which to choose, right? So to choose those, to choose the one LMS out of the 3, we'd work with 28 people, and that's the breakdown. So when you see K5 4 people, those are teachers who fall on the K5 spectrum. K8 teachers are teachers who work across the K8 spectrum, so that would not be a classroom teacher usually. The middle school is represented there to the proportion that you see, and then high school. There you see district admin who participated, IT staff, because again, it working in our environment was critically important, and parent. So what happened was that the people who participated in this process used this kind of scoring mechanism based on the criteria that was established by our stakeholders to assess the effectiveness of each vendor submission. And this was submitted through a Google form so that we could easily track and analyze the data, right? Moving on, each individual who participated in that had a scoring sheet to break down what they thought of the submissions. So what I'm trying to communicate is that there was a triangulation, so to speak, of the data we were collecting around the LMS. We wanted to make sure, to the extent that we could, that whatever LMS was selected was something that our school community felt confident in standing behind, knowing that no solution is perfect, but of what we had at our disposal, they felt good about it. So board members, I laid out for you a document before a board meeting just for your own fortification, but here displayed are some of the comments that are representative of what we got back from our sandbox participants. So you can see you can see the 3 that submitted there, what the 3 finalists were, and what the representative commentary was. So you see language like miserable experience by one LMS. That's not good, right? Frustration led to quitting. Now, since that was representative of that vendor for us, that doesn't mean that that's true of that vendor in another district, just here. That one probably wasn't going to make it through. Let's look at the next one, to your far right. That language reads, yeah, please, sure. Yes. No, I'm getting to that soon, Ms. Hecker. These are, yes, the 28. Yes. And so you can see for the vendor to the far right, I'm sorry. They were included in the process. Yes, the ones who participated, yes. Lisa, do you remember? Yeah. Yes. I think that was beta. I can go back. We don't have to guess. If I may submit to you, Mrs. Hacker, I see it differently. They're former teachers. I cannot emphasize to you enough. My respect for them is grounded in the fact that they always consider teacher kid first. I mean, students first. So they're not choosing based on what I want or based on what's going to be implemented. I can say that with 100% confidence. Yes, they'll be supporting them. I don't know if I would use the word teaching. They're in a support capacity. Right. Certainly, that's part of their role, yes.
Okay, I just wanted to clarify that.
Okay. So the comments to the far right, you can see not completely intuitive. These, again, are representative comments. And then if you look at Schoology's comments, again, representative. We felt as a team, as a sandbox team, that by far and away, with I think one dissenter, if I'm not mistaken, Schoology was by far and away the one that the team selected. Now, I want to caveat that, again, by saying that no solution is perfect. So there were probably elements in each solution that, you know, our teachers, our other stakeholders appreciated in the other two vendors. But overall, Schoology was the one that everyone felt the most comfortable with, like by far. So kind of getting back to what Ms. Hacker was saying, I want to talk about, so the top part of this infographic was pulled out in a previous slide. So let's look at beta cohort. I've spoken to the board many times about change management in the context of our technology plan and moving forward with our technology initiatives. So it is critical when you're implementing something that has so much impact culturally in a district and instructionally that you test it in the environment before you roll out to the entire district. I think that's common sense and intuitive, right? So we once again advertise to our teachers who wants to, so to speak, join in the reindeer fun with us and implement the pilot of the LMS. We advertised this multiple times, and it resulted in 25 teachers participating with us. Other circumstances contributed to that number being 25, but the overarching contributor was volunteerism, who was willing to do this with us. And if you can see there, there are 12 K5 teachers in beta, 2 K8. Again, none of that; those aren't the TOSAs. Okay. So the TOSAs are not considered part of beta cohort. What does that say for middle school? Is that 3 or 5? I need a new prescription. 5, and high school 6. So that is a representative beta cohort. And then we had, when you see number 7, we have 7 teachers who, and I think we're up by 1 or 2 over the last couple days. So we're approaching 10 new teachers to the pilot group. And the breakdown is there as well. So we have an additional 1 K8 teacher. An additional, I think that's 3 middle school teachers, and an additional, is that 3? High school teachers. So this group is joining after the original beta group, which rolled out starting, I think, late October. And down below, just for everyone's reminding, Sandbox took place June 7th and 8th. Beta cohort started October 30th. spring cohort, which is that group of 7, January 7th, and they'll run into May 31st. What's the purpose of this group? We did not call them a pilot group because pilot implies that if, we're just going to throw Schoology out at the first, that's not, that we can't do that. There was a procurement process. So beta for us meant that these teachers were willing to implement Schoology in their environments and give us feedback regarding how it was going. And then our job, to Mr. Spitz's point, was to adjust accordingly to the degree that we could. Okay, so I'm not going to read over this slide. This was included to remind our community about what I shared last spring while we are even engaging in an LMS selection process.
Wait, I'm sorry,
it's a big
Ms.
deal.
Lucas.
Oh, yes,
Ms. Marcus,
please.
did you have a question?
I'm sorry.
Yeah, go back to the last slide.
Yes, ma'am.
Can you clear something up for me? I'm confused here a little bit. Sandbox 28, is this 28 people within the district?
Yes. That's another great question. So some of the Sandbox teachers volunteered for the beta cohort, but there are beta cohort teachers who were not part of Sandbox. Great. So Sandbox cohort were the group of stakeholders that analyzed our 3 vendors who submitted for the LMS to help us select it. So they sat in a room for a couple of days, reviewed the criteria. The LMS. Which system? Right.
It was one of 3 that they were considering.
But Schoology was one of them.
Yes.
If you look back,
Well, I just got this, that's why I,
That's correct. The other 2 were Canvas and eBackpack. So those 3 were evaluated during the Sandbox phase.
So Schoology, eBackpack, and Canvas.
okay. I'm-
So to Mrs. Marcus's point, the Sandbox group sat in a room with each other with their laptops, analyzing the Canvas backpack, eBackpack, and Schoology in the context of, forgive me,
Okay, now I got it.
of criteria like this. So they scored all 3 of them using these forms. So why implement an LMS? This is just a gentle reminder of what I shared last spring. And the reason we spent so much time sharing and educating the community around an LMS is that it is such a shift. Teachers are used to what's happening in the district right now. And it was important to us to make a public and transparent case for why we needed to implement an LMS. So we did that last spring, so I won't spend a ton of time on that. Schoology is based on the process. And again, it was a rigorous one that was vetted and shared publicly. Schoology is a selected LMS based on quantitative and qualitative data. This is the only slide I'm going to read to you. From a rigorous selection process that included in all of these pieces. And these were communicated frequently and in multiple ways. And if you look at our district website, I sent multiple emails out. I could go on and on, but this is what happened in order to inform and educate our school community around this. Mrs. Hacker asked a question, Mrs. Hacker, I think it was you, around what other districts were using Schoology, particularly in California. So we reached out to Schoology to provide us that information. So there's a list of them, and you're welcome. And that's attached to the board agenda. Why do we move forward with Schoology? And I think I just went over why we did, but just to summarize, those are the reasons. Okay, this speaks to Mr. Spitz's point. What lessons has staff learned thus far from the, in quotation marks, pilot? It should really be beta group. And they're outlined here. So what you'll see on the right in terms of strengths are things that we would have anticipated and saw in the feedback from our Sandbox group. So those are no surprise. That's what we anticipate. So I don't want to spend too much time on that, though they're important. The areas of concern and follow-up that are currently happening are listed on the right. So what is pressing us right now, to the question that Mr. Spitz asked, and what I think our board members are hearing and the feedback we're getting from teachers, is the grade book piece. That is probably the most sensitive point for for our implementation. And what does that have to do with? Jupiter is currently the grade book in the district. I mean, Aries has a, Mr. Seaman could speak to this better, but Jupiter is really the tool that teachers use. It's certainly in the high school and middle school, would you say? Elementary too, or more middle school and high? Okay. To track and grade, it's to keep track of grades. So Jupiter, because it's been in the district so long and has been, we've worked with the vendor, is intuitive to our district now, and teachers are used to it, parents are used to it, students are used to it. So there's a change management element to this. We all know that when you have a big switch in something, there's discomfort. So the grade book piece is what we're working on now. So Mr. Spitz, to directly answer your question, the biggest concern that teachers have expressed to us, and to some degree students and parents, a lesser degree, but it's there, is the grade book piece. And when you ask, what are we going to do about this? We have been working with Schoology and Aries to remedy the concerns that our teachers have. I want to pause here and share something. The kind of, intuitive comparison between Schoology and Jupiter is comparing apples to oranges. So Schoology presents with many features that, when implemented, are going to transform the way technology is used in the classroom. Jupiter can't do that. But what it does well in our environment, and people are used to that. So part of the change management part of this is that in order to move forward, our stakeholders and our community have to understand, and we have to support them in understanding that the comfort you may lose with Jupiter, you're going to gain a lot with Schoology once it's fully implemented. And that's a tough thing. I'm going back to what Mr. Margot and Ms. Hacker were sharing about reconfiguration. There's stuff going on right now. Mr. Spitz, it looks like you have a question.
You're on the point that I want to. This is the one that I think we have to say, could this make reconfiguration more difficult?
Mm-hmm. So that came up in a conversation we had last week. And what we're doing as a department is going back and looking at that. Now, there are consequences were we to decide to put it off for any amount of time, and I want to work with the cabinet, Dr. Breggy and the cabinet, to outline those consequences, and then I think we make a decision as a community. If we put it off, there are consequences to that, but those consequences may be worth it given the fact that we're going through reconfiguration. There are teachers, we received an email from a high school teacher in the last couple of days who are eager to get this going because they have the technology in the room and they're ready to leverage it for what we meant it to be leveraged for. So a consequence of not moving forward right now is that the potential of what we've done with technology thus far will be slowed down. And we may be okay with that.
Can you still just stay in the beta phase, though?
Oh, good question, Mr. Mark. We could. So to answer you and Mr. Spitz, yes. If I could, I would like to come back with a more coherent plan. I wasn't expecting to present to I'm so happy I'm doing this today, but I wasn't expecting to do it tonight. Oh, because there were concerns. So if I could take that back and revisit it, Dr. Bregette, I think you'll support me when I say this came up last week, and we said that we were going to revisit the implementation. In the context of reconfiguration.
So I'm going to swing back to my colleagues, but on what I just said about staying in the beta, you just mentioned there's a staff person at the high school that's raring to go. Are they in the beta?
They are officially now. I don't think they've actually started.
Okay. So I would not want to be someone to say you're excited about something educational in your classroom. No.
Right.
Okay, that's not my job here, but I think it's clear what the sentiment we're trying to echo, and it's been a theme of the evening. Ms. Hacker, go ahead, and then I'll go back to the other. Okay. Can we move to the Q&A? I'm sorry, or is there anything on this?
May I go over the concerns just so?
Yes.
Okay.
Why don't we do that? Hold off for a second, guys.
Thank you. So the Aries Schoology handoff requires significant initial setup. What does that mean? It means that teachers have to go into Schoology and set it up to work with Aries. And if that's new to you, the first few times you do it, it's a thing. It's another change management piece that they're not used to, and why would they be? Transfer of Juno, now this is a big one, and I want to call attention to it. Transfer of Juno pods, meaning assessments, is extensive in terms of time and effort. So what does that mean? It means that teachers, I think particularly high school teachers, Mr. Seaman, correct me if I'm wrong. Will you? Oh, never mind. It's okay. It's okay. Mr. Seaman, may I ask you a quick question? My understanding is that high school teachers in particular have spent, a good amount of time uploading assessments to Juno, and they're used to them being there, and they use them over time. So moving those assessments from Juno to Schoology is going to require time and maybe even money. Maybe, I don't know that yet. We're analyzing that with the beta group, but that's going to be a thing. And the high school teachers have already brought to us, when are we going to have time to do this? And if it requires, time outside of the time that is allotted to them, are they going to be paid to do it? So we're looking at different solutions to minimize the impact to our teachers. But it's a thing, and I want to, just reading that, you wouldn't know how significant that is. That's why I wanted to go over it. The change management implications, I've spoken to that a little bit. Something like, this is significant. It's more significant than even the one-to-one rollout because of the implications for the in-class. I'm sorry, I talk with my hands. I'm sorry, Ms. Hacker. It's a switch to a new platform. That's the simplest way. Yes. Mm-hmm. Dustin, would you say that louder?
It's unification within the district. So many teachers are utilizing different platforms, and so from a parent stakeholder standpoint, it's hard because depending on the school and depending on the teacher, sometimes it's depending on how the communication goes home to the parent. And so just around the communication piece alone, unifying that from a district level all the way down to the TK level is going to be hugely successful for us.
Yeah.
Outside of the fact of what is the expectation of how are the grades going to look like? As soon as we're able to get through the bumps and bruises of the grade book piece, at least now the parents of the community, when their kids go from TK to 12th grade, they can see a consistent grade book for all of their classes moving forward and going through, instead of different versions and trying to guess. As a parent stakeholder, most of our parents aren't in the educational industry, so they shouldn't have to guess at what they're looking at. It should be as transparent as possible for them to understand how to support their student. So those are the types of things.
Yeah.
But don't get me wrong, we've had multiple conversations.
Yes. No, why don't you just say it loudly?
One of the things that needs to be considered is, we've had Jupiter for many years, and so our staff has spent a lot of time on different assessments, right? It's not just taking one class and implementing or inputting it overnight. They've built this program, some of them for, I think Jupiter has probably been existed, I'm looking at Carter, sorry, like 8, 9, 10 years maybe.
Right.
So like 9 or 10 years. So over 9 or 10 years, they've created a lot of really great assessments, and they've used it in different formats. And so we're asking them, through this process, you got to kind of pull that back. It's like emptying out a closet. We all watch that Netflix.
Marie Kondo, yes, right.
I mean, but this is also good too, because as we're going into it, you're starting to look at some assessments like, is this worth it? I mean, is this good teaching? Is this not bad? And so it kind of helps us tidying it up a little bit too. So I completely understand that there is a frustration level of saying, when I became a school counselor, when I became an administrator, I had to clean out my school counseling office. Like, I had boxes and boxes. I carried them around for a while, and then I started to realize, like, this is outdated, or this doesn't need to belong here anymore. So it's an interesting process.
Yeah, and these pros were shared last year, and so now kind of the rubber is meeting the road, if that's the expression, and there is discomfort, and that's why when you look at our district technology plan, I included the notion of change management and being sensitive to our stakeholders. And that's what the coaches are for, that's what support is for, that's what you have in a beta cohort is for. So to Mr. Margot's point, it is worthy of revisiting and how we're going to roll it out, because this started before, we started this last year. Next, so the change management implications are, I think, intuitive. It's difficult to move from one thing to the next, right? Lastly, time with teachers to provide support when and where needed. What do I mean by this? The way our professional development framework is set up here in the district, it's sometimes challenging for our coaches to have time with our teachers. I'm just going to tell it like it is. But that time is needed for something like this. So oftentimes our teachers are asking to, meet with a TOSA or have dedicated time to work on this, and that time isn't there either because other priorities have already been mapped out and planned out for meetings, or the way the PD is set up at the school site doesn't lend itself to what we need to do with them. Does that make sense? So that is an obstacle. So Mr. Spitz and all of our board members and you want to say something? Yeah.
And it is a fine dance too, and I want to be transparent on the professional development lenses. That last point is something that we have to kind of go back to the cabinet and have that conversation, because reconfiguration also requires a level of professional development and collaboration that has to happen prior to us opening up doors come August 12th. And so we have to really look at where are the pockets that we can maybe pull teachers for the LMS, but then also really evaluate, what are we utilizing our professional development dollars left to also ensure that our, to TK5, our new middle school, and some of the increases to the high school are going to be supported as well.
So lastly, before we get to Q&A, part of the beta group was to, even if reconfiguration hadn't happened, a beta group or a pilot group is meant to mid-course correct. So I shared in a meeting last week that, we got feedback from the high school teachers. They're not as familiar with it in some ways as the K-8 teachers are, but we received feedback from the high school teachers that whether reconfig was happening or not, it's likely to have caused us to rethink our rollout at the high school from what we originally intended to be. I think all of you know that I'm a former teacher, I'm always a teacher, and former principal. My heart and the way I work is based on the needs of teachers and students. So I'm certainly not going to ram something through that is not working, So if we need to slow Schoology down for the sake of reconfiguration or just for change management reasons, that's what's going to happen. So we've collected data and are still collecting data around beta cohorts so we can make those critical decisions, take them to cabinet, bring them back to board. So I think, are we at Q&A now? We're at Q&A now.
Okay, colleagues.
Okay. Oh, boy.
First, to be clear, would Schoology take the place of Jupiter grades, but Aries would still remain?
Great question. So Jupiter would eventually sunset. We would not shut it down the minute Schoology ramped up, but Schoology would sunset Jupiter. Yes. But Aries wouldn't go anywhere because it's a state function.
And then you mentioned for, I think it was a beta cohort?
Yes.
The beta testing with the teachers. Would that involve students as well? So they'd be using
So it does, but to different degrees. So the beta cohort started October 30th. So some teachers lived in the LMS in Schoology themselves. Like they just used it for their teaching and planning. Other teachers at the other end of the spectrum did start using it with their students. And as a department, we said to our teachers, implement it to the degree you feel comfortable right now. We didn't require that they use all the elements or components of Schoology. We said, do what you feel like you can do right now. So some students have been exposed, others have not. Most have not.
In terms of change management,
yes.
By experience, I've looked a little bit at Schoology. I have friends from other schools that have used it.
Yeah.
And I know what it provides, and it is amazing.
Yeah.
Just by how robust it is.
In
terms of change management, I don't think it would be as much as a problem for students as it is for teachers.
Interesting.
But looking at Jupiter grades and looking at Schoology, even seeing how a teacher can use it, I can see why that's such a big change.
Yeah.
So I know some kids have heard on campus about this might happen, and I know a lot of kids are excited about it because there's so much you can do with it.
Right.
I have a question in relates
Sure.
to our ASB class. So what we've been trying to work towards or work on is a website for our student government at the high school.
Oh, wow.
Include a lot about our ASB class, where we're doing updates, post easy accessible links to our Constitution, to Jupiter grades, to a bunch of different things. And the reason why we didn't follow through with that was because of hearing changes with Jupiter grades, and for other things we're already invested in, like 5-star.
I'm not.
5-star is just a platform for students to check in at events and to get points.
Oh, okay.
At the end of the year.
Okay.
To get prizes for kids. And so because we
We didn't follow through with one platform. My question about Schoology
Yes.
is, does it allow direct communication to students in that, well, what we've been seeing at Beverly, because a lot of the conversations we have is the lack of school spirit, and some of that comes down to not having fair communication with kids and as direct as possible. And that's something like I campaigned on a lot last year. And like something I tried to implement was, the Remind system is, are you familiar with that?
Yes, that one I am.
Actually started one with ASB and had kids sign up to that so we could directly text kids when there are updates with events. So does Schoology allow for that type of platform on it for us to use? Like, does it allow any of that customization or no?
It does provide for heightened communication, and Lisa and Gretchen, you would agree with me in saying that. I think you would be very pleased with what it would allow you and your fellow students to do. Dustin, do you want to speak to it in your former district?
Yeah, I'm going to use, so the state of California, for the administrative academies that they host, where they train superintendents, CBOs, it's funny because me and Luke are just looking at his now. He's in superintendent through the AXA program, and they use Schoology for communication, to be able to build that rapport. So you could create an actual course in Schoology, your ASB course, and be able to assign or allow students access into that course, and then you literally have a running calendar on your right-hand side that you can literally break it up with. If there's freshman documentation in one folder, sophomore documentation, junior, overall documentation, so there is a lot of flexibility for you to create how you want the ASB folder to kind of look and function.
And that excites me that you're even asking that question. Yeah.
And so, Sean, I mean, just so you know, too, I can communicate to any of the 40 other administrators I'm taking this academy with, including the teachers. We can send lessons back and forth to one another, notifications. I can talk to the whole group. I can talk to individuals just via my Schoology account.
The final thing I have to say is, since our students are so, especially in ASB, are so like involved with, can we put everything we want to do into one platform? Is it possible to have you come to our class one day?
Oh my, I would be honored and love it. I went for one-to-one, and the questions that were you there when I was there? The questions that you all asked me, you all are a tough crowd, and I loved it. You really got us thinking about some things that we not thought of from your point of view, so I would love that and be honored.
There's a lot more ideas that they have and we have about.
Yes.
We just want to try to put everything on one platform.
Absolutely, Sean. Just, send me an email. Let me know. I'll be there with bells on with some of my teammates. Thank you.
I don't have conclusions on this. What I have are questions and concerns.
Yes.
This is an area where I want to parrot what Mr. Margot said. That is, can we afford this is a significant layer of change.
Yes.
I think you said so.
Yes.
Can we afford a significant layer of change on top of the reconfiguration change management? To me, it's a question of time.
Right. Yes.
And I guess, the reconfiguration change management team has identified, I think, if I'm not mistaken, 26 areas of workload. And each one of those areas involves a number of tasks, deadlines, and assigned responsibilities.
Yes.
That's huge.
Yes.
And so far, the only people we have to assign all these myriad tasks and deadlines and responsibilities is our administrators. We have nobody as yet, we have nobody from the outside to take on this workload. Interesting, because administrators have full-time jobs.
That's right.
Moreover, in the first, what I've seen and heard in the first few weeks of school of the school year, the work is intensified until everything can be adjusted back to normalcy.
Yes.
So I guess I should really address my question to Mr. Seaman. You know what I'm talking about with regard to the steering committee and the assignments, multiple, I mean, just huge. This is another
Number 27.
area of change. Are you comfortable about laying this in at the same time?
Well, I think I'm going to kind of go back to Sean's conversation is, I think from a student change management standpoint, I think that they're going to be resilient and be able to pick this up pretty quickly. I think that there are some staff in our district that are very tech savvy, and this will come quite easily and quickly for them. I do think that we need to have a much larger, more robust conversation as a cabinet to determine exactly what are the things that we need to cut off. Because this is just one of many, and there might be other ones that we weren't considering prior to this conversation that we should take off, and maybe this isn't the one.
Right.
Only just because, and I'm going to say this is, in any sort of change management situation, when you have momentum moving forward, as you're starting to gain with staff, and staff is starting to pick it up, and you take a drought of that, or you remove it for a while, it's going to be a very difficult task for the TOSAs and for Bernadette's team to even get it back up and start moving forward.
That's right.
So did we make a bad financial decision then of purchasing an LMS or moving forward with an LMS, and then it's going nowhere, it's kind of dead in the water prior to even it getting off its feet. So it's kind of, you know, having that conversation, I think we need to have one where maybe the cohorts are smaller, or maybe we're focusing primarily on the high school next year while we are reconfiguring predominantly the TK5 in middle school, and maybe those that are in the beta still continue on with the beta because they've changed over their materials, and then maybe by second semester of next year, after we've settled in, right, into that middle school and the two TK5s, maybe we add additional cohort numbers. I mean, it's a timing thing.
Right.
I do agree, Mr. Spitz. And I think we've already made some progress on that list. When we put all those initiatives on the board, we've already made some progress and pulled back on some of those things since that conversation with our work with LAG to make sure that we too aren't, you know, burning ourselves out or anybody else.
Dustin, if I may add to that. No, you asked a question. In our meeting last week, I said that I want to go back and look at our rollout, and Dr. Breggy supported that. So to your point, Mr. Spitz, and as I said, even without reconfiguration, we would have had to do that. So what our commitment was to go back as a team and look at different options, bring that to cabinet. What are the options for rollout in the context of reconfiguration? So we're doing that anyway.
And I think it's important to reiterate the fact that we moved forward with this LMS long before we got invested in the decision on reconfiguration. So this is something that has to be tailored. You know.
Yes.
I apologize. Is just the word tailored. I think that's what we.
It's perfect.
Have to do a really great job of with any initiative moving forward. It's just that tailoring piece for the reconfiguration to make sure that's number one, and then everything else is tailored.
Yeah.
So I think it's a couple of things. Change is hard, and we're facing so much change right now in really every area. So I just want to be sensitive to the fact that I really understand from the teacher's perspective that this is new, that it's shocking, that it's, oh my God, something else I have to adjust to. I mean, I think we all feel that way. As a board, as the cabinet, the parents, the students, the teachers, we're really all in the same boat. I recognize that, but I don't think that should be the impediment to being able to move forward. Like I said, I think, you know, since we're in this moment where we're reconfiguring, I think a lot of these new ways of doing things, we have to strike while the iron is hot, right? This is a perfect time for us to reassess where we are in terms of technology and cybersecurity and privacy. And can we fold all of those things into reconfiguration as we're moving forward? So I think I support Schoology. I think it offers a tremendous amount of digital assets to the students that they haven't had access to before. I do share the concerns about the workload, about how it's going to be executed.
Yes.
I like the idea of breaking it apart, the rollout. I would prefer to see middle and high school rollout and then keep K-5 separate because I think it's far more relevant to the 6 through 12 students. By 6th grade, they are really meaningfully utilizing digital assets to do their research, to write their papers, to look at YouTube videos, to figure out different methods of studying. And I think it's important to encourage that and to foster that in that age group. If what we're looking at is a need to backburner some of the rollout, I think it ought to be in the K-5, but I think we really need to be careful in evaluating and being thoughtful about what this adds to the student experience. And the teachers will need more support.
Yes.
Absolutely. We're going to need support.
Yeah.
And as a parent, I've seen Schoology. My kids have started using it. I will tell you that the biggest concern that I've had, aside from the grade book, and I think those will be ironed out, is the idea that our students with a full course load, some of them very heavy course loads, are now having to learn a different platform at the same time that they're used to using Jupyter Grades and still carry the load of their curriculum.
Right.
And that, as a parent, is concerning. My kids haven't said, my students haven't said, this is too much for me, I can't do it. But as a parent, I'm concerned that they're now adding a whole different dimension of learning and having to check two different systems. So I think we need to be careful about that.
Yes.
But I think it is the right program for us. The timing is interesting, and we have to find a way to make it work within the constraints of the district.
Thank you so much.
So, at this point, where in the district are we in using this system? I'm hearing that you're using it, yet we're starting to think about employing it. I mean, where exactly are we in this process?
So those 25 teachers or so, the beta cohort, they're the teachers who are implementing, Mrs. Marcus. So they're at different schools. They're at all 5 schools. So where we're at is implementing with those 25 now plus 8 or 9. So
there's just a small group of people
right now
that are actually using this system.
Yes.
Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. And in discussions, and they can be sort of like mentors to people who are not yet using it.
And that was part of the design of our beta group, was that exact element. You could use that word. You could use that term, Mrs. Hacker.
So, I mean, I'm first seeing this basically now. I'm thinking to myself as a teacher that I would have to, change over, and it is scary.
It is.
So it's going to take a lot of support.
That's right.
But it seems like we're already doing it in piecemeal. I'm not sure whether why the concern is with the time constraint and all the reconfiguration, unless there's it seems like we're already doing it.
We are. I think it's just around another change for our teachers and how we roll it out. We were just so everyone is reminded, we were scheduled to ramp up August 20 this year. Like every teacher in the district was going to be expected to use it. Given reconfiguration and what we've learned from Beta Group, we may want to scale that back. That's part of what we've been charged to look at by Dr. Breggy, and what I want to bring back.
Well, that brings up the interesting point that Mr. Spitz made about the fact that if this is going to take from the reconfiguration, then I would be concerned about that. So,
thank you.
So I'm glad to hear that you've addressed the issue of perhaps you're considering scaling this back from your August deadline, because I guess my first question is, and then I'll get into what I just said, do you think all the teachers in our district right now know that we've adopted an LMS? Do they understand what an LMS is? And do they understand that Schoology was supposed to sunset in August, and the expectation was that we were all going to be under that, that software?
Right. So unfortunately, I can't speak to if all the teachers knew that. What I can speak to is that.
Do they know? Like, do they know now? Hi, Mr. Carey. I'll use his.
They've been on.
Is yours ready? So I guess just to reiterate, my question is, do they know now? If I were to ask any teacher, do you know that Beverly Hills Unified has adopted an LMS program and it's Schoology? Do you think they all know? Or how do we not know that, I guess?
I mean,
if the goal was to sunset in August.
So we have, I can't say if you asked every teacher if they would know, because sometimes professionals don't read their email. They don't listen at faculty meetings. So I can't be responsible for what my colleagues digest. What I am responsible for is that I messaged it multiple times in multiple forms.
Okay.
And I feel very confident about that. If someone doesn't know, it's because they weren't paying attention. I'm sorry, I just have to be transparent.
Okay. I don't know what's been done. Again, I don't know, to what degree has this been communicated. So thank you for clarifying that.
My pleasure.
But so let me think a little bit here. If the beta testing group was 25 teachers, and the expectation was that we were going to go to this method of delivery in August. And, and so in that beta testing, how much has been theory of how much can be accomplished with Schoology versus demonstration of what actually, having those 25 teachers say, here's my English class, this is how I communicate, here are my assignments, and then transferring that data to Schoology. How much is in theory versus practice, I guess is my question, in those demos.
When you say theory, what do you mean? I'm
like,
sorry.
I could understand why you would, if you have 25 teachers, you'd want to say, here's the most that you can do with Schoology. We're going to take it from here and go out and just show all of the different tools that you can do to capture and maximize the use of Schoology. There has to be a benefit, right, compared to Jupyter.
Yes.
So how much of that has been theory versus showing a person how to transfer from Jupyter and use Schoology?
I understand better now. So the coaches sit down with the teachers, like the teachers who are in beta cohort, the coaches would work with them to do just that. For example, we had professional development the last week of winter break around this to support teachers and thinking that through. Most of those teachers weren't beta teachers, though, who attended the PD on schooling. There were a few, but most weren't for that PD.
There.
You were new to it.
Okay.
So that's
So
the role
some.
of the TOSA to sit down and help. Sometimes it's one-on-one, sometimes it's in a group. I will say, because I think your question is getting to this too, most teachers haven't implemented the full
spectrum
of what's available through it.
Right. But so I guess if we're going to go from Jupyter to Schoology, and I guess my concern is if we're telling teachers, and we have 25 teachers, use it as you please, which you're comfortable with, how do we go from that to just using it entirely in August and dropping Jupyter, or using Jupyter? I guess the issue becomes, are we going to, and the students are resilient. I agree with that. I think the students will have an easy process of navigating and learning the features of this program. But there will be a discrepancy as to, based on the teacher and how much they fully use and buy into the program. So you can have one English teacher really using it, while another one uses it, somewhere in the middle, and one doesn't use it. So then, does the student suffer in that process through communication, assignments, testing, and then the parents also then, right? Because they use use Jupyter to know where their student is. And there's a lot of features that are user friendly. So, and I think as a parent, I will tell you, I know that K-5, the usage of Jupyter for a parent or a student is mild, and then there's more use in the middle school, and then there's tremendous use at the high school. Tremendous. So for a parent, just to know. And sometimes I can have, I can be notified of 10 things that happen with one student in a day and on a daily basis. And so I guess I would be concerned as a parent and a student that there would be a degree of discontinuing that communication, because some teachers are very, very secure in using it and feel comfortable, and some don't, and some are refusing to use it because they're just not savvy in that way. So how do we as a district deal with that?
So may I kick off and then don't apologize to me, Dustin. Okay. So Ms. Hacker, what you're describing is what,
Uniformity is the word I'm using. I mean, how do
Yes.
we look for uniformity? in
Absolutely.
usage?
And that's something we talk about with anything we roll out. So if Dustin's rolling out a new curriculum, the same exact question could be asked of that. And this is where I'm going to circle back to my principal hat. So my role with my team is to support our teachers, to inform them and educate them around all the components, the full implement of what Schoology can do. The expectation and how Schoology is used, that's when, frankly, site administrators circle back and hold us accountable. So if a teacher or anybody really is not using a tool to the degree he or she should, that support that they might receive from their administrator. I mean, that part is not my department's role. Our role is purely support and professional development. In terms of actual implementation, that's when we work with our site administrators to make sure that everyone is held to the same standard.
Yeah,
Go ahead.
I just want to piggyback off that. I think one of the conversations that comes, sitting in the seat over the last year and a couple months is the teacher accountability and the grading practices to begin with. And so even when we start to talk about reconfiguration as obviously our #1 priority, there is still a lot of conversation around, the benefits of reconfiguration is being able to actually have a middle school department, actually being able to have multiple third grade staff members being able to collaborate over 5 days instead of a single once a month, to be able to start talking about that and unifying their grading practices, what they're doing and starting to share best practices. But the nice part about Schoology is it allows them to be able to share things amongst themselves within the teachers as well, to start to show and trying to create that unification. I'm going to go back to the site administration, but also the district administration
Yes.
as well. As, the teacher accountability and the grading practices is something that should have been looked at a very long time ago to begin with. There are some discrepancies depending on within the program how different teachers are grading different students. So that was an issue with Jupiter. Right. So Schoology isn't necessarily going to increase or decrease this. We hope it decreases it by the opportunity of staff now being able to share resources quickly through Schoology. And also from a parent standpoint, you have one portal to look at everything. So you have all the classes into one portal. You have all the curriculum into one portal.
Right.
You have your online textbooks into one portal. We can hide and you have to look at it as like an electronic backpack for each of our students, but also look at it the same way for each of our teachers, but also for each of the district administrators. I can go to Schoology and be able to help support, offer support, or help read, amend any assessment, classroom lesson from a teacher standpoint. So Katie is my middle school department chair. I can go in and work with her and then start to push out and share information to the other middle school math teachers.
No, I understand clearly the difference of an LMS program versus Jupiter. My question is more just making sure that we transition and you make use of the program once it's adopted. Otherwise, it doesn't matter how great the program
Absolutely.
is. If the users aren't doing it, then the students will suffer, and then the parents will get upset, and the board will hear about it. And
I
that's
agree
basically
100%.
the way it goes in that order.
I
have a
agree.
question.
Yes.
Is there a back end to this program where you can see who's using it?
Yes.
Where you can actually, so
Yes.
you'll know. So
Yes.
you'll know exactly who's logging in, not only from the parent and student side, but also from the teacher side, who's actually fully utilizing it. And then you can give support where support is necessary.
Exactly.
Or let the teachers that are really running with it and understand it and it feels intuitive to them help support the teachers that are not having such an easy time.
Yes.
I guess the rollout has to be so successful where everyone's using it. The rollout really has to be successful in that teachers are engaged, they understand, and they're competent using it, and there's standards set that the district, someone, has to hold all of us accountable, the parents, the teachers, and the students. Like, this is if this is going to be the platform to communicate and to do business as far as the district is concerned with homework, assignments, testing, communication, then it has to be fully carried out. Otherwise, as I said, there'll be discrepancy and there won't be uniformity. And so even if you know who the back, who's using more of it, it won't really matter because you need to execute successfully when you launch it. Is my point.
To Ms. Walker-Schuman's point, if we know that though, and it's not a big brother thing, it's like, okay, we have this kind of usage, TOSAs, we need you to deploy in this way. Site administrators, What I won't do, though, let me be clear, I'm not going to give a printout to my site administrators to, that's up to the site administrator to do. I'm not in the business of gotcha-ing teachers. But I think we leverage the data we have, the usage data, which is what our board member was speaking about, and also the anecdotal data. And then additionally, the feedback our teachers give. I will say this, as we've rolled out one-to-one with our teachers, and you could imagine that there are different levels of integration with our teachers with the devices, of course, right? Our teachers are the ones telling us, we need support in this area. Let's say I'm teacher A. Teacher A will contact Gretchen or Lisa, two of our great TOSAs, and say, I need help in this area. Our teachers have been self-assessing and self-diagnosing and reaching out for help. Now, do all teachers do that? No. But the vast majority are doing that. They're reaching out for the help. If our teachers know what's expected in the usage of Schoology, I've found that they want to meet that level. They just need the support to get there. That said, Mrs. Hacker, your point is extremely well taken. If we don't put those pieces in place for well-executed rollout, we would have missed a great opportunity. You're welcome.
Okay. Thank you, Ms. Lucas, for the update, which is requested. It's a lot to swallow in one night. Yeah. I appreciate staff and cabinet's concerns or entertaining the concerns of the board as far as workload and time frame. So I look forward to hearing some revisions in what everybody's going to be up to in the next 7 months.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Now we're going to start voting on stuff.
Oh, they're done with it.
I need a motion to approve the consent calendar, less item 9M.
Oh, thank you. I'll move to approve the consent calendar, Mr. Margot.
I'll second the motion.
Minus item 9M.
Thank you. Minus item 9M.
Okay, thank you. Approved by Ms. Hacker, seconded by Ms. Marcus. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Thank you. Okay, item M was pulled.
I asked that it be pulled.
So can I get a motion for discussion?
Yeah, I move approve item 9M.
So moved.
Moved by Mr. Spitz, seconded by Mrs. Hacker. Discussion, sir.
I just have two quick questions. In the cash collection report, there was $55,285 collected from Warner Brothers for rental of high school property.
Right.
Two quick questions. I may have missed it, I'm sure I did, but did the board approve this rental? Because I think that there's that the board is responsible for rental of school properties.
I can share that policy with the Board of Education. When I reviewed that, I did not see where every rental needed to be approved by the board.
And second question I have is, did this impact at all or have any conflict with JPA usage of facilities?
It did not. The JPA responsibility and commitment that we have is first and foremost. Everybody worked with the organization to help pull it off.
Thank you.
Any more questions on that item? Okay, all in favor? Aye. Opposed? Item M carries. Moving on to reports. Dr. Breggy.
I'm just kind of taking off from the facilities report. Tonight you heard a lot about reconfiguration, and reconfiguration is certainly a lot more than just moving people and moving things around. It is a transformative process. This is an opportunity, it's a monumental opportunity for our school district. You heard just this evening with the special education audit report, some of the areas of recommendations and continuum of services. And this is something that we've talked about for the last couple of years, is that more of what we're doing is that we look like a system of schools rather than a true school system. And so through our reconfiguration process, that's going to help us get to become that true school system. And to do that, we've put together a steering team that is put together. There's a couple of board members, there's some principals, some cabinet members, and we have had an opportunity over the last couple of days to start to look at what our leadership strengths are so that we could start leveraging this process. We've had an opportunity to start looking at our values. We've been looking at the mission. We've been looking at where we want to go as a school district and how we're going to make this move a transformative process. So the last couple of days that we spent getting to know each other, we started to look at the tasks that are involved. And so we started to put together a work stream so that we could begin to look at how this will all work together, whether it's instructional or whether it's with our facilities team. And we're about to get to a point where we're going to be using one common system so that we can show the Board of Education and the public where we are, so some progress in our areas. And again, that includes everything from the moving pieces to changes in instruction and what reconfiguration actually looks like. Each board meeting and through a communication plan, we will continuously update the public as we move forward. The last couple of days, if that's any indication of feeling very strong about where we are now and where we are going, I certainly have that. We are consistently plagued by group of people that want to operate down here and come at us. And I'm going to tell you as your superintendent, we're working up here. And we're proud of this work. The information that we're going to be providing you over the next couple of months, you will see is going to fit directly into a strategic plan, into our values. It's going to change the way that we behave as a school district. And we look forward to showing you those results. In the next week or so, when we start working with facilities, we are reaching out to staff members. We are working with some of our students to get information so that this is not just a process that's going to be kept inside. We are going to be including students and parents in our transfer process so that students have an opportunity to get to look at their new schools. We are spending a great deal of time right now looking through teacher requests for the process of transferring teachers to their new assignments. As Pam had indicated earlier, just about everybody is going to be impacted by the change. It could be that they're moving a classroom 2 classrooms away, or it could be across town, and it could be a change of grade level. But we feel like the process that we're putting together is a thorough one, and we have a lot of eyes looking at it. We've got good communication with our union groups, and we're progressing exactly where we feel like we should be right now.
Thank you, Dr. Berge. I just wanted to, one comment, just piggyback. I had the pleasure of meeting the LAG leadership group today, and I think it's an investment for our district, and I was very pleased with the questions and the vision that is coming from the team. And so I think this is an investment. It's an opportunity for us to, it's kind of like an MRI, if you will, to really look at our symptoms and why they keep reoccurring. And it's a real deep, systematic look into Beverly Hills Unified School District. And I'm really pleased that we are doing this, and it's an opportunity and for the entire community to be part of. And so thank you for just having the vision to do this. And I know there's a lot of staff behind you, and so I think I'm excited, and I think the district should be excited. I think this is an opportunity really to make things better for all of us. So I can't say thank you enough.
Thank you.
Okay. Sean, student board member report?
Just a couple of reports for some groups on campus. We have a lot of stuff that have been going on. First off, this past weekend, the DECA kids here at Beverly went on a competition. It was against all the SoCal chapters in California, and it was just a business competition to test their skills that they've been learning, whether it's in marketing or finance. And we sent over 70 kids. It's the largest group that we've sent ever. And I don't have the exact number of awards, but from the look of it, it looks like the best that we've ever done in competition at district. So, as a leader of the group, I'm really happy of the way we performed. And our state competition will be in around 5 weeks. So it's February 28th to the March 3rd, I believe, or March 2nd. So, in Anaheim again, unfortunately. We love to travel, but it's around the corner. So we are looking forward to that. And also some big news is at this district conference, one of our members, he's a current junior, Matthew Alana, and also one of the officers, he was elected as the vice president of Southern California DECA, which means he will be in charge of all the DECA chapters around Southern California, and he'll also join the state officer team. So some larger representation for us, and a lot of good stuff with DECA been going on, so I'm happy with that. Yearbook, this past Friday, they just announced their theme, which is Occupy, and what that means is our students have basically occupied time, space, ourselves, and moving forward from that, we are more than just students. We're artists and gamers and singers, entrepreneurs, whatever it may be. So their goal is just to show that what we occupy is more than just education and students. It's a huge myriad of opportunities that we pursue on campus and for our lives. Congrats we had some amazing SAMO games last week. And congrats to our boys basketball for winning. That was an exceptional game. And so yeah, congrats to all of you who played and are part of the team. Our Wish Week is coming up. The last week of January, I believe the week of January 28th, will be our annual Wish Week. And we just got news today or yesterday of our Wish Kid. So that'll be coming out soon. And for those of you that don't know, Wish Week is the program we do with the Make-A-Wish Foundation to raise money for a certain wish kid. And this year our goal is $15,000. So we hope to exceed that. And as a part of Wish Week, tonight was actually the talent show, which just ended. So I hope those of you that weren't at the board meeting were at
How'd I
the
do?
talent show. Sorry. So I hope that went well. It just ended right now. And I'm looking forward to an amazing Wish Week. And that's all I have.
Thank you, Sean. Lot going on. Very exciting. Human Resources. Need a motion? There's no presentation on this, right? Okay. Yeah, I need approval.
I'll make a motion to approve the ratified tentative agreement on September 27, 2018 by Beverly Hills Education Association, the certificated unit.
I'll second. You can have it,
Okay.
Mrs. Walker.
Moved by Mr. Spitz, seconded by Mrs. Walker-Schuman. Any questions?
Nope.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Thank you. Motion carries. Business and Finance.
Wait, we're about rejection. Did we do that already?
No, we're about to.
Okay.
Finance.
Mr. Chairman, I will make a motion to reject claim number 564452 and claim number 564247.
I will second that.
Thank you, Mr. Spitz and Ms. Marcus. Any questions? Good. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motions carry. Claims are rejected. There's only 3, and I had questions on one of them. So, okay. Moving on to Planning and Facilities.
I'll make a motion to approve item 13A, approval of amendment number 26 to the agreement with DLR Group for architect fees for modernization of Beverly Hills High School.
Thank you, Mrs. Hacker and Mrs. Walker-Schuman. Any questions on this? Jeff, can I ask you a question? Mr. Pileman, sir? My understanding is you were involved in this item, so you can speak from some experience, correct? Okay. The question I asked, and I apologize for not getting the question to staff earlier, the reason for the amendment is based on the increase in final construction costs for B1 and B2, correct?
Correct, the final bid price.
Okay. And the contract with the architect has a provision that allows them to renegotiate the initial fee based on the final price, right?
Correct. It's
Okay.
an OPSC contract. It's based on final construction cost.
Okay, so they are exercising their right to change this amount,
That's
correct? Okay. I have I understand that it's contracted. I understand we agreed to the contract. I understand all that. I respect that. I do, however, for the amount of work that we have supplied this firm, for them to even exercise this part of the contract, to me, I will say it here, is deplorable. That's my feeling on it. Now, my question to you is, what happens in the case where they don't get this increase? Is their work, see, because their workload didn't change. Our costs changed, but their workload didn't change. So it's upsetting to me. Most people wouldn't be negotiating these kind of contracts, and I hope that in the future we do not allow this to happen, or we allow it to happen fairly so the district doesn't just get, and I will say the word, bilked.
Is it true that their workload didn't change? The architects?
In proportion to the increase. That's what I would say.
It's a rather broad question. If you look at the scope of work back contemplated in 2013 versus the scope of work we're staring at that constructing in 2019, the scope and size of the job has definitely changed for various reasons.
But we have also had several amendments to the contract along the way reflecting those changes.
Correct.
Okay.
Keep in mind it's the master contract for the entire high school, and we're talking about one of the multiple projects involved in this contract. This is, I would say, probably one of the most difficult contracts I'd ever had to manage and administrate. In hindsight, we probably would have done this differently if we were sitting here in 2013.
It's the way, from my understanding, I think the way Mr. Blake has explained it, it's the way the original contract in 2013 was executed, right? The language for amendments for architect work, is that basically, we're married to that language, right?
Correct. 2 points. Number one, back in 2013, it wasn't uncommon for contracts to follow this OPSC guideline based on cost of construction. I think OPSC is possibly going away from that type of recommendation to school districts. The other facet was that this contract encompassed, let's say, for example, 7 separate projects. We have the B1, B2, the B3, B4, C, site work, parking project. So initially, the contract was based on an OPSC formula, but the architects were only contracted for the first step, the conceptual and roll into the schematic design. So you have 7 projects as the example, and one project may have got approved to go into schematic design, and then there was an amendment to take that one to DD. Right. Then project number B got approved to go to schematic design, and one got approved to go to construction documents. The next one over here got approved to go to the DD level, design development. So we worked with DLR for approximately 3 months last winter to dissect the contract all the way back to ground zero. What came out of that was there was approximately a $400,000 credit that offset when we did a true up earlier that year. Again, pretty complex. So with this particular amendment and understanding your position and of the overall cost and scope of the project, there's 2 things that we did in attempting to negotiate this on the benefit of for the benefit of the district. Number one, since the Measure BH bond has passed, an evaluation was done in that capital master plan that was presented to the voters and approved last June. We applied those values to the overall formula. And the reason we did that was because the once you apply these types of updated values, the overall sliding scale lowers. We wanted the school district to get the benefit of the doubt in this true-up using a smaller percentage after we apply it to the sliding scale formula, as opposed to looking at B1, B2 as a standalone project. That saved us approximately $200,000 in this negotiation. The other thing you'll notice that on page 1 of the contract, in the context and scope of services, there's exhibits A through I. A through I are extra service items that the architect has been involved in over the course of the last 6 months, that at one time contemplated doing separate change orders for these items. That request was met with intense opposition by the school district representatives that were involved in this negotiation. I'll leave it at that. So what we have here in the end, we have exhibits A through I are being rolled into this true up, and they're not being charged. The district is not being charged extra for those particular line items. Okay. So in summary, we've applied the new master plan capital master plan values to the formula to get the benefit of a lower percentage in the sliding scale. Number 2, we've wrapped these scopes of work into this particular true up, and they're coming to you with one change order as opposed to multiple. Hearing your initial comment about the overall contract, we're looking at on modernization projects running approximately 8.18%, on new construction projects approximately 5.15%, and depending on where you're at in the market, that 5.15% would be pretty tough to get right now, hiring an architect for new construction. Then again, the 8.18 on the modernization side may be a little bit strong. Okay. So if we're talking about $375, $400 million worth of work, yes, the architect design fees is a large number. As a percentage is how we have to look at that. It is a necessary evil in the construction process, especially in the DSA sector, to have engaged a professional to run the design and approval portion of the project.
Okay. Jeff, thank you for the explanation. And I appreciate you and your team's work on this particular amendment. I know it wasn't simple. I guess my final question is, encompassing all of the other exhibits as it does, will this amendment conclude the B1, B2, unless we change something, the district changes something? Does this conclude our amendments on the B1, B2 portion of the project?
I can't state that it is an absolute.
Right.
As we peel back a wall, as we peel back a foundation,
that's on
and
us.
Those unforeseen
I understand.
things
I'm
are
saying
outside
barring
that sliding scale.
Barring that.
That is correct.
Okay, but this should be the last one
Yes.
coming from the architect side.
Right.
Okay.
We
All
hope
right,
to focus on B3, B4, and the remainder,
and I
not talk about B1,
I
B2
understand.
design costs anymore.
Don't throw all the good news at me at once, okay?
There you go.
All right. Thank you for clearing that up.
Okay.
Any other questions, colleagues? Okay. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries.
I'll make a motion to approve item 13B, the approval of the annual cost estimate with Department of Toxic Substances Control for regulatory oversight activities at El Rodeo.
Second.
Thank you, Mrs. Hacker, Mr. Spitz. Questions?
I believe I had a question on that. Something about makeup or something, was it?
Dry cleaner.
That's or cleaning, cleaning
Correct.
makeup or a cleaner site.
So if I could, most of us are familiar with the RAW project at El Rodeo.
Yes.
There was a underground oil tank on that facility that fed fuel to a boiler system. Over the years, that tank leaked, and what resulted in this DTSC cleanup project. The notice that we got for the updated annual administrative costs from DTSC references the dry cleaner site. I happen to know that's another DTSC project in Beverly Hills. That on the exhibit, you'll see the Department of Toxic Substance Control letter. That word, dry cleaner site, happened to make it into this rationale of this board agenda. I apologize for that. I was on the phone clearing that up with Philmar today. But you'll see that on both the letter from DTSC as well as the remainder of the rationale, we are talking about the El Rodeo school site.
Right.
And we know it's the oil tank leak, so not the dry cleaners.
Jeff, this has been ongoing for several years.
Yes.
This whole film arc, this comes back to us every year. Is this in perpetuity now? This cleanup or administrative cost every year, or is there a completion?
This is in perpetuity at this point.
Okay.
I spoke with Philmar today, our consultant, to confirm that. They feel that this estimate, which is what this letter represents for the next fiscal year, is strong. They're confident that it will come in lower, but this will be a reoccurring fee that goes along with the oversight of this particular project. This is in conjunction with the land use covenant that was prepared by DTSC and has been filed, of which we'll abide by. We have an annual reporting responsibility each March to report to the DTSC that we have complied with the covenant.
Okay. Thank you. Any other questions, colleagues? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Moving on, 13C.
I move to approve 13C, approval of amendment number 22 to the agreement with WLC Architects for architectural services for the Horace Mann School Modernization Project.
I'll second.
Thank you. Moved by Ms. Walker-Schuman, seconded by Mrs. Hacker. Any questions?
What is this? Is this part of the original one, or is this a new charge, or?
No, this is the continuation. It's the roof.
And is it part in payment for it? I mean, where's the? I mean,
As a part of the modernization for the Horace Mann projects, Building A and B, Building B being the new classroom building, being a modernization of the existing two-story building, and even going back to Building C, the auditorium, which was the first one, and the recently completed site phase. One element of that project was not, I'm going to clarify, two elements of that property were not modernized. One being the roof of Building A, second being the replacement of the chiller in the current chiller yard. Those two projects, the roof replacement for Building A as well as the chiller replacement, are scheduled for this summer. The engineering for the chiller project, just as a footnote, we're attempting to do in-house direct with the manufacturer to save on design fees. Because the roof is a DSA project, we need the services of WLC Architects. So our plan is to complete the design in the next 45 days, competitively bid this project out, and be ready to commence work the first week of June.
Any other questions? Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Moving on to 14, professional official business.
I will make a motion to approve the revision to the annual motions.
Okay, moved by Mr. Spitz. Who seconded it? Okay, thank you. Tristan. Any questions? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Finally, discussion.
On item 14D.
It's a discussion item, Ms. Marcus. It's okay. You don't need a motion. So it was brought to my attention of holding a Brown Act workshop for the board. I reached out to CSBA and some attorneys. Very costly endeavors to do that. I wanted to ask if my colleagues would be okay. I was informed by Mr. Willis, our counsel, that he's happy at no cost to come and meet with us in a study session if we had questions on the Brown Act and anything that we didn't cover or you guys didn't recently cover up at CSBA. If you would like him to come do that and spend some time with really addressing specific concerns or questions that you would have regarding the Brown Act. Are my colleagues interested in that? If so, I can set it up.
I would be interested.
And I
Okay.
think also, just for purpose of discussion at the workshop or meeting when we have it, would also to include consensus on protocols as a board for communication and just protocols. I think we should all agree on
Okay.
and that's not just Brown Act. It's a little bit more broader.
No, but that's fine. We do Brown Act and protocols,
Because I
board
don't wanna-
protocols. That's fine.
Great, thank
Okay,
you.
terrific. So I'll set that up. And then I think, Dr. Bragg, you had something about the Google Gmail.
Yes. At some point, even if we tack on another meeting, we are going to be experiencing our transition from Outlook to Gmail. And so we think that it would be in everyone's best interest if we had a little work study session so that we can help kind of coach everybody through that. It's a different look and feel, but I think everyone will get it pretty quick.
Maybe on that same day.
I think it's a great idea if we
Yeah.
put them together.
Yeah, we can do that. That's fine.
Thanks.
Thank you for bringing that. Communications from board members?
Just Happy New Year, Happy New Semester, and to all the seniors, let's enjoy this last 5-6 months.
Okay. Nothing?
I wanted to just ask that we also consider adding to our next agenda, yes, our next meeting, that we consider the vision and mission statement by comparison to some other school districts because of the work that we're doing with that, so that we can come up as a board with a consensus on where we're headed.
Okay. Do you want to add that to that particular session or talk about adding it at that session?
We can add it to that session. I think it'd be worthwhile.
Okay, so,
Dr. Bergen, can I answer that? In view of the steering committee's mission and vision statement?
Sure.
I mean, just to get a little bit of a head start, that is one of the purveyors of the steering committee, and they have worked on one that they're going to be presenting to us, which is something that is going to be a lot probably shorter, but all-encompassing, and we'll be bringing you to you for approval, I believe.
I think that we could probably do it at that meeting. Like, let's show you, what the steering committee has been looking at, and then get input from all board members.
okay.
As I understand it, that's something that the board is supposed to all work on together, right? Determining direction, particularly given the reconfiguration.
Right. So I think, if I understand correctly, when they bring it, we would, if there was modifications or
Sure.
something,
Yeah.
that would be the time. That would be the opportunity for us to engage in that.
Okay.
It would be a working meeting kind of thing.
So I don't know what the timing on that is, but perhaps since our February meetings are all moved around, maybe the first week in February we can have that study session for those items that we're discussing.
Okay.
We can send out something to the board and
Sure.
get a feel for it, okay?
Well, I would recommend that the board have a type of a study session meeting at which time the leaders of, the leadership advisory group can really update the board on the details of the work that's been done, because the board should give its approval. The board should exercise its oversight at various stages, and this is a stage. So I recommend that we have a meeting as soon as possible.
Okay, so let me reach out on these issues and see how we can schedule it, making sure that there's enough product and deliverables from LAG to come back to us with. Because I believe they just started, and you've had a couple of sessions.
I had a brief conversation with Mrs. Ortiz-Glass,
Uh-huh.
and she wishes very much to do this.
Great. Okay, so then we'll send out a request for the board and get some dates.
Great.
And just for everybody to keep in mind, in February, we're shifting our regular board meeting to one regular board meeting and adding an extra regular board meeting in March, just because of calendar schedules and holidays and the wonderful work our Kbev students have to do on the every 15 minutes in February. So thank you, everybody, for a very, we certainly talked about education tonight, and I like that. A little long, but I like it. Okay, so everybody have a wonderful couple weeks. We'll see you soon. Meeting is adjourned.
Hardly worth anything anymore.